Ah, incredible. Okay. All right. Well, here we are. I'm with Frank TWWK. First guest, dude. Thanks for being on.
Hey, thank you for having me. I've done many ThriftCons now over the years, and I've actually seen you outside of them too. So it's good to have a full-blown conversation for, I'm not going to say the very first time, but a real conversation for the first time.
No doubt. Yeah, no, I'm excited as well. First things first, how about just an intro from you in your own words? Who are you? Where are you from? What do you do? What's your title?
They call me Frank TWWK. I've been in the vintage space for, I don't know, many years now. I'm an old person, and I don't do this as my main thing, my full-time gig, because I've been touring in the music industry for almost 20 years, and that sort of led me to selling merch and clothing and t-shirts and so on and so forth when the pandemic happened. I never thought any of my old stuff actually was worth anything. And I had a friend that was very proficient in Depop, and it all started right there. And then it turned into absolute chaos over the past several years to where I made this into a real business.
Incredible. So you didn't ever, I guess you were just collecting to collect at first. There was no thought of, oh, I'm collecting all of this stuff to one day resell it.
Yeah, never, literally ever. Like I said, I've been touring for almost 20 years, so I have stuff. Not everything actually is expensive by any means, but I have tons of stuff, and I've always kept stuff from tours or my own personal collection from when I was a kid, and so on and so forth. And not once was I ever trying to sell it, because why would I? I had a steady career. Money was never an issue. I haven't been broke since like my mid 20s, just because I work my ass off. It's not like a, I don't I'll toot my own horn. Like I tour year round every year, and I was just like, oh, I'm not selling my stuff. What am I selling? I would never even think about it. Just not in the forefront at all.
So let's start in the music industry then, because I guess that really sounds kind of like what got you into all of this. So, what is your history and your past in the music industry? Why have you been touring for the last 20 years? Who have you been touring with?
So as many people do, I grew up going to shows. I'm kind of in the, uh, I guess the hardcore metal punk space. I was in a metal band from, or in several different metal bands from, I think it was 2001 I started. I was maybe, I don't know what, 12 years old, give or take. 36 now, going on 37 soon. I'm an old man. The older people who are in this space will just be like, "You're out of your mind. You're not old at all." But my back feels old. Started when I was young. Started going to shows. Started a band, and I toured in the main band I was in. My TWWK moniker comes from a band that I started in 2004 called The World We Knew, which was a metal band. Was on a couple different labels, released records all over the world, toured all over the world, did the damn thing, like really did it for a long time. But it started there. And then I I noticed after the third record, it was fine. It was all good. We toured with a lot of bands that I like loved. I'm wearing a Throwdown shirt right now. Throwdown is a straight edge hardcore band from California that I loved when I was a kid, and I ended up touring with them later on in my career. In that band I was singing for. Um, what I'm getting at is, I towards the end of that, I was just like, do we do a fourth record? Like, I don't know. We're at the end of the label, like whatever the last label we were on. We were at the end of that record cycle, and I was just like, I think we were like maybe shit 60, 70 tours deep at that time as a band, and 10 years of music. I just saw the writing on the wall, and that's good because I was in my early 20s still. Like, I started touring young. I was still in high school when we started touring. Um, so I was just like, I don't know, man. I'm sick of being broke. And I was only like 24 or something like that. And it just is what it is. We did a lot of really good things, stuff that like way bigger than a lot of bands ever get the chance to do. You know what I mean? But it's not enough. It just is what it is. That's how the music industry is. Ran its course and whatever. Anyway, so when we broke up, I started tour managing and doing merch for bands of all sizes, club acts, still like small bar acts and stuff like that. But then over time, it gradually went into doing like stadiums and arenas and amphitheaters and stuff like that. So like as of the past, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years, I've done uh, Pennywise, the legendary punk band, Hatebreed, the one of my favorite bands of all time, hardcore from Connecticut. Alanis Morissette. I did Seal. The last time I saw you outside of a ThriftCon, we met at a JID tour
Hmm.
in Denver, and I work for JID. I'm apparently, from what they told me, the first legitimate merch guy they ever have, and I've been on and off with him for 6 years. And then most recently, I'm doing Weezer, and in around a week or so, I start Deftones. So over almost 20 years, it's just a matter of I started, and I'm gung ho about anything I really put my mind to, and so far it's worked out.
And some of those bands that you mentioned too, you toured with open as an opening act with The World We Knew, right? Like Hate Breed. Didn't you get to play some shows with some of those bands that you mentioned?
Yeah, we toured with Hatebreed because in 2009, I'll tell that story quick because it's not super related, but it's cool because it was like a dream. It was a dream to us because I remember we put out our first record on a small straight edge indie label called Seventh Dagger Records in 2007, and that was like only a year after we started touring full time. And towards the end of that album cycle, doing like pretty basic whatever tours, maybe 100 people in the room was like a godsend. It was great. And we were young, really young. And then I woke up then one morning, I think it was winter time, and we tried not to tour in the winter if we could help it because we were in shitty vans with our trailer on the back. All of us are young. We're not driving like in crazy weather that often if we can help it. So putting a trailer behind your van is pretty rough. Like if you're going, especially if you're going from like Denver to Salt Lake or whatever, it's just might as well just put a gun in your mouth. It's like
Yeah,
it's terrifying.
Death Wish.
So I wake up one morning, we're not touring. It's like maybe like January, February, I don't know. This is 2008, 2009, give or take. And I wake up, I look at my email first thing in the morning, and I get an email from Josta, the singer of Hatebreed. His name is Jamie. And it said something along the lines of like, what are you guys doing for your second record? I've seen you around, I've seen your name. And I was like, the singer for one of my all-time favorite bands since I was a child. Literally, my grandmother bought me the 1997 Satisfaction to the Death of Desire record for my birthday one year when I was in middle school or early high school days. So like I got an email from him asking about what we were doing for the record, and I was like, "What is happening?" And he eventually signed us for our second record, and we got to tour with Hatebreed several times. So it just goes to show, like if you're working hard at whatever your craft is in general, things could really happen if you think bigger picture than just whatever is happening right at the moment. It's like you think long term.
Right. Just put in the work. The right people will notice if you actually put the work in, right? That kind of idea.
That's the hope that we all
Yeah,
we're all striving for.
no doubt. So what then? So you're in the metal scene, you're in the hardcore scene. Were you collecting before you were doing the merch or before you were actually behind the scenes with the merch? Were you just collecting the entire time just as a fan, like as you're, going around on these tours? I'm sure obviously as you're attending shows as well. When did you really start the collection?
Yeah, that's a good question. I didn't even think of it as collecting. You know what I mean? It's kind of just anytime I was able to get a free shirt just because I didn't have to pay for it because you know, we didn't have a whole lot of money. None of us in the band at that time came from a, you know, a rich or a wealthy family. I grew up in a trailer park in my like early years. And then, you know, I moved a couple times. Really weird childhood. I moved a lot around Long Island, where I'm from. Long Island, New York is still my favorite place on earth, and I've been everywhere. But that's just that's home. Um, what was I going to say? Oh yeah, I didn't call it collecting. I just anytime I would get a free shirt, so I didn't have to pay for it, I would be like, hell yeah, this rules. And I kept all of them for a time. And then I got my first apartment when I was young. I was homeless, but not on the street homeless early on. I didn't live on the street. I had very, very, very close friends taking care of me because I had a weird home life with one of my parents, and then the other one moved away to a different state. Funny enough, it was Colorado. I just didn't want to move to Colorado because the band got started and it was going well. And so I just collected all the stuff. But I didn't call it collecting. It was my clothes. Any tour I went on, any local band that was like, "Oh, you guys were cool," like, "Oh, nice to meet you." We stayed at a house. Like I would give one of our shirts for one of theirs, or whatever the scenario was. For years, I would just have all that stuff. And then when I moved into my first apartment, I was maybe like 21 or something like that. Long Island is very expensive. The East Coast in New York in general is very expensive, but especially Long Island. I did sell a bunch of it on MySpace back in the day. Um, but it wasn't stuff that was like I would ever be able to fit in as an adult anyway. So it's kind of just depressing that I won't have a lot of that stuff ever again, but I wouldn't be able to wear it now anyway.
What was the selling process on MySpace like, and like what would you would yeah was it did it look similar how it is right now? You were just posting like flat lays on floors and would hit you up, or like what was it like on MySpace?
So you know what? I guess you're right. It's not too much too different. Um, I don't think I probably made it as aesthetically pleasing as it could be right now. Um, I haven't thought about this in so long. But if anybody's old enough, and Mars, I'm pretty sure you are, the bulletins on MySpace was where it was at. A bulletin on MySpace, for those of you who don't know, it was a thing everybody who you were friends with, everyone would see it if they just clicked the bulletin section of MySpace. So there's no algorithm of things that you may be interested in showing up in your feed. It was just whoever you were friends with, if they posted something, you can see it.
Yeah.
So I would always post, "Hey, my rent is up this month and I'm fucking broke because I'm 22." You know what I mean? Like, I'll sell this shirt, whatever it was, for $10, and I did that a lot because I was so broke. I remember I would there was a Chinese food store at the end of my block in Amityville, New York, right next to the train station. That's where I lived, in the smallest room imaginable. No kitchen in there. I just had a hot plate, and I have it was the show Hey Arnold.
Yeah.
It was a boarding house essentially.
Oh,
I
okay.
lived in a boarding house, but I had the only room.
Dude, coming from Colorado, boarding houses legitimately seemed like they were only in Hey Arnold. Like I didn't know that people actually lived in boarding houses.
Yeah, I lived in a boarding house of sorts. This is my first apartment ever. It was unbelievable. Um, it was the only room in the house that had its own bathroom and shower. The only one. Everybody else used communal ones. So like I would go there because my old guitar player at the time, he was like, "Oh, a place opened up," before I moved in. And he lived upstairs. He used the communal shower and toilet. And like I know him, he's one of my closest friends. But like I would never want to share a bathroom with him because like you know what I mean, like unless we
Yeah.
were living in the same house, like, and but like if I didn't know him, I'd be like, I don't want to fucking share anything with him. He was like a really like long haired, big bearded, scary looking dude. So like everybody in that room and house did that except for me. I paid a little bit extra per month to have my own. It was the smallest room of all time. Anyway, I was just so fucking broke that I would sell my stuff just to make ends meet for. And everybody will laugh at this now because this is like 15-ish years ago. My rent was $540 a month for the smallest room imaginable in a boarding house.
Again, that was expensive still. Like back then that was probably crazy, you know what I mean?
Unbelievable. I was, like I said, only 21, 22, living on a wage that is never consistent because it was based on touring in a metal band. And we always, whatever money we made, hypothetically, I'm just going to throw a number out there. If we made $10,000 on a tour, because we were a DIY band, it's not like we were playing arenas and stadiums. We were playing like thousand cap clubs with sometimes half full, sometimes even a quarter full, just because of the nature of the beast. That some tours do really well, some tours don't. Um, and we're splitting that 5 ways or 6 ways, depending on if we had a manager at the time or a booking agent who takes 10%, all that kind of stuff. So I was
That's
broke.
No different than these rappers or pop stars. They get to keep the whole check, but bands are splitting it with so many guys.
You say that, but a lot of those a lot of those artists and rappers, sometimes they do this thing called a 360 deal,
They got the
where it's
crazy.
like
That's for sure. They do have the crazy deals.
they'll get a payout, and I won't say who, but like I'll give you an example. I worked for a band one time that did a 360 deal prior to me working for them, and it doesn't affect me at all, not one bit.
Mhm.
But they got a deal of like it was like maybe like $2 million just outright to sign this deal with a merchandise company. So they had no say whatsoever in any of their designs or what's printed, when it's printed, how it's printed, who sells through. It's all just here's $2 million in your hand, you get it. You know, you have to pay the taxes and all that shit, but we get to do whatever the hell we want with all of your merchandise. And so that kind of thing exists, especially with bigger artists who all the streams and stuff, they may see a fraction of that because of the deal in which they signed.
Right. No, I mean it's real life. There's sharks out there.
Oh, it's psychotic.
Okay, so you're collecting or not collecting, but you're buying all of this merch. You're selling some of it. At what point in time do you start to see it as a collection, or you start to understand what you have or what you're sitting on?
Like I said, I think so. I'm about to leave on tour with Deftones in like a week. I want to say this is my 113th tour in 19 years. I'm really weird with statistics, but not so much about like I'm a big wrestling fan. I know dates of of specific WrestleManias and stuff like that. But I love my own like history, and that sounds so, what's the word I'm looking for? Egotistical, but I don't mean it that way. I'm very proud of the things. I'm only 36. I'm proud of the things that I've done in a young age because a lot of people don't get the opportunity to do this or don't want to. So like I get to travel for a living all over the place and get paid to do it, and I don't have to pay to be at any of these places. So like I'm proud of those things. So I keep those weird statistics. So in 113th tours, if I hypothetically just took one shirt from every band, I would have got 100 and, or if three bands run every tour, you do the math. That's like 300 plus shirts, whatever it is, you know? I think it didn't really register to me that I had a whole lot because I would just put some of it into storage or into a bin or whatever, just like any other collector from the kids that say, I got the OG haul from the original owner. I did that. But I never looked at it. And then when we stopped touring, I remember I had the entire year of, I want to say it was 2000, yeah, 2020 laid out. I knew what my touring schedule was the whole year. And it was only January or February. And I remember I was in Mexico with the band I was working for that we were going to do the whole year of touring. And we got word that uh, COVID hit, and it was a thing where they were going to shut down, the borders or the air, all the airplanes, all the nonsense. Everybody obviously knows what happened. And we went home not knowing how long it was going to last, whether or not the rest of the year of touring was going to happen, all that nonsense. And once we got word that all the tours were canceled, I was like, wow, this is very strange to me because I've like I've only been touring for 8 to 9 months, maybe sometimes even 10 months out of the year for my entire adult life. I've never taken more than maybe like 3 months off ever, ever. Not even joking. I've never had a job outside of touring since I was like in my early 20s. So touring is all I know. It's all I've ever done. So when everything got shut down, I just started I was like, what the fuck do I do now? Like, what can I do to make money? And once again, I wasn't broke, but I just knew that hypothetically, if it took 6 months for touring to come back, and it didn't, it took way longer. I was just like, well, how am I going to pay the rent I lived in at the time, a big, beautiful house in Orlando. We were on a lake. It was me and two other people, but still, good money per month. Each one of us was paying because it was a nice house. We didn't want to live in a shitty place. So I started looking at my stuff. One of my roommate's boyfriends was a big Depop kid at the time, and I just saw him posting stuff, and I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna download that and just buy cool things that I didn't know existed." And I was seeing a lot of shirts that I gave away or sold for like $10 in my early 20s on there, and in an adult size. I was like, oh, this is very interesting. And I remember the first night I spent like $200, and I was like, wait, wait, wait. I was like, this is like, why am I spending money right now? This is the whole opposite of what I wanted to do. And I opened up all those bins of all the stuff that I got over the years, and I was like, well, I don't wear this anyway. Like, what's the point? And he showed me the ways of Depop and eBay. And like in the first week, I think I made like $800, and I was like, this is crazy. I just didn't know. I didn't know, man.
What a time to get into it too. I mean, COVID was a crazy time for the online selling. Prices were going up.
Yeah, it was chaotic. But I had all this stuff. I already knew all the history of everything. So I had to like kind of go back and understand the old history. You know what I mean? Like I knew where everything came from. Still to this day, I call out people left and right that are posting things from a specific era that I know really well because I was there or I was selling it or whatever, whatever. And I was like, you're wrong. Like you're lying or you just don't know. It's like this, you are wrong because I lived through all that and I was doing those things. So I took several months before I started like introducing myself to specific people. And obviously everybody knows how the lives went with Chris and so on and so forth. Everybody knows that for the most part. Um, I started studying what everybody else did and tried to do things differently and make it more watchable or just more in depth. And I tried to understand all the intricacies from an outside perspective of somebody who didn't come in as a seller, just somebody who collected tons of stuff over the years. Because the last thing that I ever want to do in my professional life at all is to come into a space where I know I'm not going to say nothing, but I'm a brand new person. I'm a brand new entity. I want to come in and know what the hell I'm talking about. So if anybody challenges me in any kind of scenario, I could be like, well, wait 1 second. You might be wrong about this. I may not know a whole lot about X, but I do know a whole lot about Z. So you know what I'm trying to say. So I took a while to really study the intricacies of the earlier stuff prior to my collecting, so that I knew what the hell I was doing.
Amazing. I mean, it's a pretty, it's an interesting way to approach it and an interesting way to come into the whole thing too. Like to come into the vintage space, like you said, not really knowing it all, the vintage space itself, but you knew and had a deep relationship with the clothing, the pop culture, the stuff that was, the history of the things that were being passed around.
Yeah,
Um, so let's start there. Let's start with like Depop and eBay.
yeah,
If that's when you first started, because I even go on your Depop right now and it looks so much different than, your the curation of your Instagram page, the curation that I see at the actual live events, when you attend ThriftCon and you vend in person. So what's the approach? I mean, what and how has the approach differed over the last 3-4 years of you selling on Depop? And then now how do you, differentiate this is the product that's going to go on Depop or this is a product that is going to be on my Instagram or actually be available in person or, at a pop-up?
sure. I right this second, my online selling is very specifically like not that interesting, I guess you can call it. It's just not that interesting on purpose. And the reason for that is because I'm about to leave for tour soon, but also because, as I'm sure we'll get into the topic a little bit later, I just sold a massive, massive, massive collection outright. So like I starting from when I did start, I did the Depop stuff and the eBay stuff and Grailed, obviously, just to get me started, get my foot in the door, and see what actually was making money and what wasn't. But obviously, the live scenario definitely piqued my interest because during COVID, we all know that it was just pure. like lawless money making psychosis.
Uh,
Everything was going for too much money, and you know the deal. You remember how it was.
mhm.
Um, so that piqued my interest. So like I said, I kind of I watched what everybody else was doing, and I when before I dipped my toe in to be like a person that people like saw the face of and knew the face, and then put the face to the name, so on and so forth. I learned a lot of stuff, and I tried to do things different. I keep on saying that. And when it came to live auctions and things like that, that's where like I really started to get my foot in the door. And by when I say that, I mean I whenever I posted anything, whether it was on my Instagram or whatever, I made sure my face was in it. And why do you do that? It's because every single vintage account, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, well, I guess TikTok's different now because it's video form for the most part, but especially Instagram, everybody, just like you said before, it's flat lays or you put it on a hanger and you put it up against a fun background, whether it's a brick wall or a tree or on the grass. Everyone does that. And if nobody's really paying attention in the world, all shirts are mass produced, all of them, every single one of them. There's very, very few that you'll find where it's one of five or one of one, or one of 10, whatever. They're all mass produced, whether it's 100 to 10,000 or so on. You're going to see shirts all day long, flat laid. What makes it any different from anybody else? So everything that I ever posted, whether it was stuff that was personal or stuff that was for sale, if you look deep back into 2020 or 2021, whenever I actually started to show that I was selling things, I was always in the photos of the stuff that I was selling, always. So when it got to the time to do auctions and things like that, everybody knew me by face already. If they didn't know the name, my if you want to call it my charisma or whatever from being in the entertainment space will do that for me. Like that'll shine through and people will understand, oh, he's entertaining in a way, whether I was trying to be funny or whatever the nonsense was. It's just, but as long as I walked in there and everybody knew my face, then they put it to the name, I could do no wrong. That's what I wanted. I want people to, that strangers that I don't know, to be like, oh, that's Frank. I know that guy. I recognize him from whatever it may be. That's number one. So when I started to sell things, I always put my face involved. That hasn't changed much. Like I just did last year in 2024, I did the archival project where I posted a personal T-shirt of mine every single day the entire year. Last year I was in Australia, Japan, uh, all over all over Europe, the U.S. and Canada, and I didn't miss a day at all.
How hard was that? This is something I wanted to ask you about. So just,
Yeah.
yeah, I just wanted you to speak a bit more to it, why you decided to do that project. And then was it taxing as you were doing it? Did it get, how annoying was it to have to try and take that photo every single day? Did you actually take them each day or did you double up some days or?
No, there were days where I was in Nagoya, Japan, so I had to do a month's worth of pictures prior to leaving for that tour. So I know that every day before I go to bed, I can draft one up. And then when I wake up, look at the time in whatever like whatever the US state was, or, East Coast time, wherever I was, I'd just be like, okay, well, what time is it in the States right now? Wherever I was in the world. And I would post it according to that. But that's besides the point. It's just, I always made sure that I was in the photo so everybody would remember my face.
What else? I mean, what else then did you see? Like, because I think that is a big one, and that's something huge that you struck on. Obviously, just differentiating yourself from the pack because everyone does just post the item itself. They just post the clothing generally in this space. So I think that is just recognizing that off the bat is big. And also, people just want to support a person. They see an actual individual. They start to feel like they get to know you through your content. Um, they are much more inclined, I feel, to support someone like that they feel like they've formed a relationship with, as opposed to just like, oh, this guy has cool T-shirts just like the rest of the 100 dudes.
Yeah,
Um,
that was the goal. I mean, it's just there's very few artists that just like, besides Slipknot and things like that, who just wear masks so nobody knows who they are, or like the guy from, what's that DJ, Dead Mouse or whatever. Like that's a specific, it's a very specific thing. But even those things are how they're I'm not going to say categorized, how people know who they are. That's an image. That is their image, and that's how people know them. So if the same Nirvana shirt gets posted 800 times as a flat lay, who is that person? So like when you're doing an event, why does anybody, why, like, how are they going to know who you are by your booth or whatever? They have to know your name because they don't know who you are by your face. So my goal was like, if and when, which we did a lot, and that's how you and I met. Um, if and when I started doing events later on, I think it was in the early 2021. If I can walk into a place and then tons of strangers that I've never met before recognize me already, they're going to be like, "Oh, I'm going to go to that booth." Because I don't, I don't know him personally, but I'm going to go there because I recognize his face. I know what kind of stuff he may have in the booth. That was the whole goal from the get go.
Yeah, I mean, very smart. Any other differentiators or things that you saw coming into the vintage space with an outsider that influenced your approach or the way that you do things, the way that you resell?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not I'm not one to want to be, for lack of a better term, I'm not trying to be an influencer or anything like that, right? It's just not, it's not something I'm interested in. Um, but I like talking a lot about t-shirts and the history of whether it's music or stuff that I'm interested in, it doesn't matter. But everybody kind of knows what I'm into based on the curation that I come up with, or whatever. I'm a quality over quantity kind of guy as I look around my room right now with all the crazy shit just hanging out in the space. Um, so what I was trying to do after I did a bunch of lives and got my foot in the door and people kind of knew what I was bringing to the table was, I never saw anybody travel in a situation where they're doing events like by the day in different cities and different states. So my buddy J Val and I, who we did a lot of these trips together, we started doing vintage tours. That was my next step up from like just doing auctions and things like that, where all these thousands of people around the country could like see who we were and what we were doing and what we were selling. That was step one. Step two to us was like, well, we're not touring in the industry anymore. Like, what can we do to broaden our horizons and then also sell tons of stuff every day? Whereas maybe the same 50 people that are buying on lives can't spend, that high price point every single day. And that's the nature of auctions. It's just not feasible for most people. So like, what if we just go to different shops around the country, like a tour, and sell stuff every day to new people in those cities? So we're collaborating with our fan base, quote unquote, our fan base, whatever, our followers on Instagram, saying, "Hey, come see me in San Antonio, Texas on, what the hell's today? February 11th." You know what I mean? At this vintage shop. And then the vintage shop is like, all right, cool. They're promoting our shop. We're going to promote the fact that we're doing a small meetup and get together where Frank and his friend Jason are bringing 700 like premium teas to the shop today. We don't know what they have, but if you pay attention to Frank and Jay's, inventory, if you ever saw what they did or what they're doing, you know that it's going to be good. So you should come out. So it was a collaborative effort to make an interesting event 4 to 5 times out of every week in a different city everywhere. That was our next step. Nobody was doing that.
How did it go?
It was great because like we made so many connections, and we wouldn't just sell to these people. I mean, kids would bring dozens and dozens of high-end shirts based off of, and crap too, of course. Everybody has crap. I have crap. But they bring stuff over. We would trade and sell and so on and so forth. But we did this in dozens of cities at tons of different shops, and we made good connections that way. And that's how on the weekends we would always do the big events. We put thrift cons on the weekends, so we would route to whatever city you guys were going to do it in, or Chris's Virtual at the time was also another one,
Mhm.
and then you had the one in Faded Dated Warren, I think it was in Texas.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. Very legit.
Yeah, exactly. Like we would route all the bigger events, the ones with several thousand tickets sold or whatever the scenario was, on the weekends, and then on the weekdays we would just hit up friends of ours who ran shops around the country and route to those specific cities of the big events on the weekends. And it was great. It was nobody was doing that. People went on trips to source and things like that, but you never know where you're going or what you're going to get. We just we made them come. We went to them, but we made the people come to us in the process at those events, small events.
Do you remember how many stops or cities you ended up hitting along the way, or how long you guys were on the road for that?
Yeah, there were. I think we did three or four of them in a matter of 2 years, maybe even a little less than 2 years, because we had nothing to do at home besides just auctions and selling online and things like that. So we would never do anything less than 2 weeks because we were renting a van because we had hundreds and hundreds of shirts with us. We had tons of racks and hangers and the typical. We would put the 10 by 10 tent in there because we have a very specific setup that we like to put at these events, and we want to make it look better than whoever else is putting it together with limited resources. We only had a van. We didn't like rent a U-Haul or whatever.
Mm.
And we would do at least three or four small events a week at different spots, different vintage shops or friends' houses or whatever it was. And then we do the big ones on the weekends. So at least five events a week for 2 weeks, 3 weeks at a time. I think the longest one we ever did was a full month, and we hit. I think that full month was when we did. I think we did. It was virtual Houston straight into a couple of events, whatever, like smaller meetups, into Faded Dated Worn, and then I think we did your Denver pop up, your ThriftCon Denver. I want to say that was 2021. One of the first or second bigger vintage tours that Jay Val and I did. And that one was like a month long, and then that one led into one in Ohio. So if you look at a map, that's going from Florida, where we are now, over to Texas, which is like 18 hours worth of driving, but with spots in between, straight up to Denver, which is another like 18, 20 hours, give or take, where we're coming from. And then over to Ohio. That's a big square. That's, I think, what, 5, 10,000 miles, something like that. It's a lot.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. Do you think you guys did more selling or buying on those trips? Obviously selling at the larger events, but I'm sure there was some pretty came up on some pretty good stuff, I can imagine.
Yeah, I mean, it was legitimately ridiculous. There were ridiculous times. One of my favorite parts about one of those trips, I couldn't tell you, like what city it was, but there's two actually. One has a way deeper story, which I'm sure we'll talk about, the collection story. But the other was we did a house call from another seller that we met in like the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. We just knew he had a lot of stuff, and he knew we had a lot. It was typical, and that one was a big seller for us. We sold, I don't know, 100 shirts each or whatever to this one guy, and that was fine. We hung out at his house, we met his dog, whatever it was. It was towards the end of a tour, and I remember the reason why we wanted to go there, or I wanted to go there, and I rooted us to go to his house was, yes, we were going to sell shirts to him, but there was a kid that was sort of close to the area who had a very specific Adam Sandler college tour 97 shirt that I wanted, and at the time like no one had it. It's the mime clown face one, and two different. I wish I could reach it on the wall. I'm not going to get up. Two different Dumb and Dumber shirts, and once again, at the time, these shirts were like $2,500, $3,000 because nobody had them. Nobody was selling them. This is a different time. Now they're slightly less, maybe 1,000 to $1,500 or whatever. But at the time, I was like, all right, I'm going to tell this kid to come meet us after we do this big sale because then I'll have a little bit more extra money to play with. And he pulls up. He's I'm At that time I'm like 34, 35, whatever it was. He had to have been 19, 20, 21. Pulled up on a crotch rocket in the middle of a parking lot, in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania. Young as hell, just had him in his backpack. And I remember J Val looking at me and goes, "Is that him?" I go, "I have no idea. I hope so." and young as hell, and I had to like get his mom's Zelle number in order to like do the deal with him. It was fucking outrageous.
But it happened. So you ended up getting all three T's.
Yeah, it was a ridiculous deal at the time. It was a lot of money, and the way JVal worked, my partner at the time, he just didn't like to do tons of money for one piece, and I understand it. Like I totally get it, but like that was my thing. I knew how to source correctly or buy in bulk to where I could afford to get the one big one to stand out and still make money on whatever that buy was. But
Yeah.
I curated a very specific way because I just I don't know. I don't go to the bins. I'm not a thrift guy. It's just never been me. I'm not interested in that. And that's totally fine to do it. I just never enjoyed that aspect of it. So I had to think outside the box. Like I couldn't tell you how many quote unquote original owner deals I've done with people that I've known from touring,
Hmm.
Things like that.
Uh, if you can speak just a bit more to that, because that was something I was going to ask you about, is how you go about getting your inventory, especially if you just said it yourself. You're not a thrift guy. You don't like to be in the thrifts. You're not like, do you ever go to the thrifts? Okay, then how are you getting this
No.
stuff? Have
No.
such a large
It's
inventory.
yeah, it's funny. The last time I went to the thrift, I just this past Christmas. So it's right now it's February 2025. So December Christmas time 2024, I was at my dad's house, which he doesn't live very close to me at all. It's a couple hours away. And I went to his house and I was just like, you know what, I'm gonna go get a coffee. And I walked out, I walked out of his establishment and went to get a coffee, and I realized there was a Goodwill right there. So I was like, this is the first time in probably 2 years that I've walked into one. I walked out with jack shit. I get it. Like I know you have to be really, you have to put some time into that kind of stuff. Of course I didn't walk in there like expecting to get anything, but I walked out and I remember sipping on my coffee. I go, this is exactly why I don't do it.
Yeah, no,
I'm
it's tough. I mean, it's only getting
Yeah,
harder. So that's why I
yeah,
think and since it is, like if the people like to thrift, if you're thrifting for personals, that's a different story. If you're just trying to find things to add to your wardrobe and all of that. But if you're really trying to make money or trying to build a collection, I think you got to find other avenues.
yeah. There is absolutely nothing wrong with going to the bins and spending all your time at the bins and the thrift and waiting on different rotations and like that. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm older and I have less time to do that kind of thing, but also I have a a bigger picture in mind when I do these kind of things. I'm not going to say everything I do in this space is for money because that's not true. I have a very, very large collection of personals that I'm just not selling at all. We talked about earlier, I did the 365 Carvel project where that was all my stuff. I wasn't selling any of those things. That's 365 shirts that I chose to do that project and post every day for 2024. Anyway, so it's not all for money, but when it comes to the stuff that I'm willing to sell and when I'm curating to bring events like ThriftCon or to any of those events that we did at local shops around the country, it has a lot to do with bulk deals. And I'm not hitting like Facebook Marketplace and uh yeah, things like that. I'm not running ads on Facebook, which I know a lot of people do. I'm not going to like the grunge group on Facebook to hit up old people about their shirts that they haven't thought of in 20 years. That's all fine to do. It's just I don't do that. I've made different relationships over the years to where those wells aren't running dry. I meet people on every tour, whether or not they've been touring for a long time or not. That's to be determined depending on who I'm talking to. But like to give you an example, I know the wife of the very first Slayer tour manager ever. It's like they want to make a little bit of money on stuff they haven't thought about either. You know what I mean? I know that person. I know somebody who toured with Smashing Pumpkins for like 20 years, and that's just from being on the same bus on a specific tour with them. And then he sees me in a new not new, but he sees me in a different shirt every day of bands that he likes or whatever. Oh, where'd you get that? I tell him, he goes, oh, I have tons of that stuff. That's how I do it. And then there's times where I'll buy out an entire collection from somebody who just doesn't want to do it anymore or whatever, needs the money. Maybe it's tax season and they're like, shit, I just got hit with a couple $1,000s in whatever. And I'm just like, oh, well, I'll give you cash and I'll literally fly to them and I'll buy out their whole collection. I'm not, I'm not scared to drop. I say massive. It's massive, maybe to some people. I'm not scared to drop 10,000, 20,000, $50,000 on something if it brings the per head down on stuff that's actually worth selling. Like I said, I don't want the stuff that you see all the time, every single day. I have some of that, of course, for my Depop and my eBay from sometimes, but like that's just not my way of going about it. I'm not interested in that. I'll buy the whole damn kit and caboodle because I want to stand out in a space that is pretty mundane. And that's from, once again, that goes to me outside, like trying to think outside the box. I look at it as this is kind of boring. Why is it boring? In my eyes, my opinion. I'm sorry if that offends anybody. I just want to be slightly more entertaining. And if t-shirts is all you care about, that's fine. I'm not here to be your fucking, you know, I don't know. I'm not here to be the big dog in the space where people need to take my opinion. It's just that. It's my opinion. But I want you to come see me for whatever it is and be like, whoa, this is the craziest duration that I've seen today in whatever event. That's the goal for me every time.
Yeah. So, what is it that you offer people shopping with you and your specific interests and tastes in secondhand clothing? When someone shops with you, what do they get, and what is the curation that they're going to be provided with?
I can only speak on what I'm interested in. I did a ton of research on what's rare, what's not rare, for the reason of I want to know what I'm buying. If somebody comes in, and this happened to me at the last ThriftCon I did, uh, I told Joe this story and it was hilarious. But like, if you come into me and you're trying to get whatever X is for way less money than what I know it's worth, and you don't even know what the hell the item is, that drives me absolutely insane. I'll go off on a tangent. I'll like lose my mind if you're trying to downplay whatever it is that I'm trying to sell that you're asking me about, but you don't even know what it is. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
so I like to know. I know a little or a lot about about a lot of things. So I won't come into a space where I'm selling that day, put something on my racks, and you not be able to take it off my rack and go, "What is this?" I'm going to have an answer for you.
Mm-hmm.
I will always have an answer for you. I'm not selling anything that I don't know something about. That's my number one rule. I'm never going to buy something like I don't know. Like you're not going to see unless it's like the rarest one and I know specifically what it is and why it's rare or whatever or what it last sold for. That nonsense. What's the
Yeah.
market now anyway? Nobody knows. It's all fake. We're just making it up as we go. But it's like you're never going to see me with like a Dragon Ball Z shirt because I can name one guy out of the whole thing, Goku or whatever. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's just not my thing. But if it's the biggest, rarest one that I happen to get a good deal on because I know the market and understand the market and what things sell for, I might have it. But I'll explain that to you at least. Oh, this is why it's $600. I don't know, just making up a number here. But if you come to me, partially the reason why I did that wow, I can't speak. The reason I did the archival project was because in every single post, I have a detailed description of why, what, when of the specific shirt that I was detailing for that day out of the whole year. So my goal is to have people be like, all right, I'm going to Frank, whether it's to ask about whatever thing, whatever shirt, whatever band or whatever movie or anything like that, a mosquito head or something like that, just anything, he's probably going to know what he's talking about. And if he doesn't know, he's going to tell me because I'm not going to bullshit you and pretend like I know something about something I know nothing about. I refuse to do that. And there's a lot of used car salesmen out there that do that a lot. It drives me absolutely nuts. So if you're coming to me for something, I will tell you straight up, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I know everything about this, or I know nothing about this. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there is a lot of kind of snake oil salesmen in the vintage space that uh, obviously, I get it. You want to make a sale. You don't want that t-shirt on your rack anymore, but yeah, take an advice from our friend Frank here. Just do the research. Just learn about what it is that you have. That's one of the coolest parts about vintage is when you're finding these things or you're finding things out in the wild, if you don't know what it is, it doesn't mean you have to leave it in the wild or throw it back in the bins or leave it on the rack. Like if you see value in it, like you already at least have a good enough eye there, but take the time to learn about it. And it then opens this whole new world up to you. You might find a new subculture that you're completely interested in. You might find that you're not interested in it at all. Boom. It's then at least you have the knowledge to educate someone when it's sitting on your rack and they ask about it in your booth. You don't get because it's pretty easy to pick out when someone's bullshitting you. Yeah,
You just want your clientele or people that could potentially become customers to meet you and trust you if you sell them something. And even if you don't sell them anything because they're not interested in whatever it was, maybe it wasn't their measurements, whatever the scenario is, you still want them to go, you want them to leave and be like, well, that was a good experience. He knew what the hell he was talking about. Maybe I didn't agree on the price. Whatever, that's totally fine. I don't take it to heart if you don't want to buy the thing that you potentially will buy, that I'm trying to sell you. If you don't want to buy it for whatever the price is or whatever, that's totally fine. But I want you to leave at least being like, well, that guy knew what he was talking about. Maybe we just didn't agree on the price.
for sure. Because it's always a potential future sale too. He might be
Always.
checking later, all that. So that's insightful. That's good. All right, let's get down to the nitty gritty. There's two specific things that I wanted to chat you up about. The first we'll get to is ThriftCon Florida. It's been said in some spaces by some people that you had the biggest sales weekend of all time in ThriftCon vendor history. At, now, we don't necessarily have all the numbers from every vendor at every event, but I would have to say that you are up there. I will let you speak to it, break it down for us, give us the numbers, the strategy, the approach, the event itself. Yeah, talk to us about that event and how that weekend went for you.
Sure. First things first, I've done ThriftCon at least. I would have to, if I'm taking a guess, I'd say maybe 5 or 6 different times in several different states and cities. Um, I've never had a bad sales day ever there, ever. So anybody who's complaining, and this is hypothetical because I don't see. I know, yeah, yeah. I don't see what what Mars sees and what Joe sees and so on and so forth. Like I don't see that. I'm not looking for that, but they do. It's their event. I can say in full confidence, 100%, that I've never had a bad sales day at a ThriftCon, whether it was one day, 2 days, a weekend in Atlanta, Texas, Denver, so on and so forth, Florida. It's never been bad. But I did all the work leading up to those moments to once again, like I said, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I made sure that the second I walk into a room, and some people will think that this is egotistical. It's not. I promise you, I'm not trying to be. But I walk into that room and at least vendors, let's just say vendors, before customers even walk into the room, vendors all go, oh, Frank's here because I did the work. I made sure they knew who the hell I was. For whatever avenue they found me or my space, whether they don't want shit from me or anything, I will shake 100 hands of people that I may not even know because I don't know their face. And I have to be like, I'm so sorry. I have to say, what's your name? What's actually your username? Because I wouldn't know who you are anyway. Oh, you're Thrift God 69. I remember that name and we'll shake hands. Like, I know you, but like, that's the thing. I will walk into a space, especially if they're not doing an event for a long time. Like, it was 2 years before I did ThriftCon Florida, ThriftCon Fort Lauderdale, give or take, just a few months ago. 2 years went by and I didn't do a live event because I was touring and I was working on the deal that I'm sure we'll get into next. Um, but like I did the legwork to make sure people knew who the hell I was. So I could walk into a room, the vendors know me. I'm surrounded by people that I'm already friends with, so we're all looking out for each other just in case anything goes haywire. Maybe somebody steals something. It's the nature of the beast. Maybe that happens. We're all looking out for each other. I've made all those connections. I don't know everybody, but then I'll walk in and then customers, the doors open, and lo and behold, we have a line of 20, 30 people deep before we even let somebody into our booth. But it's because for years I made people understand who the hell I was, what I sold, that I only do quality product. And once again, this is just me and how I do things. It's not a dig on how anybody else does stuff, but I try to make it worth it to know if I'm doing an event, no matter what company it is, whether it's a ThriftCon, whether it was a small event at one of the shops that we set up at along the vintage tours we did, that if I was showing up with my 6 to 7 bags of shirts, 200, 300, 400 shirts, that it's going to be worth your time. That's it. It's almost as simple as that. But it took years to make sure that people knew who the hell I was in the process. It's not just an overnight thing.
Yeah. No, not at all. I mean, so then I guess specifically for that event then in the months leading up to it, what was the strategy or how did you ensure that you hadn't done an event in 2 years? So then what was the strat for ThriftCon Florida? And then how'd you approach it? And then what was the result?
Sure. This is a sort of a loaded question because of the
Right, right,
what I ended up bringing compared to what I could have brought, which
right.
we'll get into. But let's just say that I had, and we'll talk about it, but I had the option of bringing along anything that you could ever possibly think of in the category space of vintage, whether it was high or low, it didn't matter, anything you could possibly think of, versus my specific own personal curation. And the reason why I didn't do the anything you could possibly think of was because I sold it, but that's a story that we will talk about. In this case, I had a good. I never stopped buying ever. If it makes sense to me and I like it and I know a lot about it, and if it pops up, whether it's Whatnot or any of the reselling sites or in a buyout or a collection that I bought out, whatever, I'm never going to stop buying. Period. Whether I'm on tour or not, it doesn't matter. I'm always looking. My eyes are always open. So I had a good month and a half where I think Joe might have hit me up, and I don't know if he asked if I was busy or what my touring schedule was or whatever. It doesn't matter, but I specifically try to take off at the end of every year to where I'm not touring in maybe November, maybe definitely December, and then January. That's like I'm trying to always stay not cold. Florida's nice this time of year. It's perfect outside. I don't want to be cold. I don't want to be in a semi truck loading boxes all day. I just hate doing it. So I'll push that off as far as I can. So I saw you guys announce Florida ThriftCon in December 2024. And I was like, you know what? I think I can make that happen. I hit up J Val, who's my partner, not financially, but we're just best friends, and we come from the touring industry. So I was like, hey, do you want to do ThriftCon? We'll drive down. It's 4 hours. We'll do it. He goes, oh, I don't, I only I I guess we have a little bit of time to curate. Yeah, and we spent a lot of time making sure it was the best that it could be with the small amount of time leading into the event. And I think I only gave myself like a 2 week heads up of being like, hey, everybody, pay attention. You should probably book a flight if you're traveling because it's the first event I'm doing in 2 years.
Hmm.
It's just I don't try to preview anything. It's just a matter of if you know who I am, that was my strategy the whole time. If you know who I am, you better show up.
So there was no like you didn't make any sales before the event. You didn't set like there were no like, yeah, that's crazy.
No.
I feel like that's like
If
some people bread and butter. They like that's
yes.
how they ensure that they're going to make the money. But I think you approached it the opposite, like I'm going to hold out on everybody. And then, if they really want it, they're going to come pull up at the event and talk to me about it and pay me for it.
The entirety of 2024, I didn't sell anything, because of the deal that I made with the big collection.
Mm.
Um, and then I went on tour for the whole year, and I'll explain that. But went on tour for the whole year, so I would buy here and there on the tour, but it didn't. It never was. It's just to have stuff. It's to have stuff that I like and what I feel is worth it from a deal standpoint. Because I know I'll eventually sell X, whatever X is. I'll sell it, whatever. I always want to be prepared for that time where a friend of mine, a client or a friend goes, I know what you have, but do you have this specific thing? I go, yeah, I'll sell it to you when I get home in a month. Or I have an off day in Orlando during this tour. I'll stop in my house. I'll collect my mail. I'll ship out your one shirt and I'll go back on the road. I always like to have stuff around. Um, but for that, I got dozens of messages, dozens, when we announced that we were going to do Florida, because people travel for those. And hey, you're coming in on setup day, which is always the day before. And are you bringing everything in? No, not at all. I'll set up my tent, which is a very specific setup. Well, we will set it up. I'm not bringing a single shirt into the room. 9 a.m. on show day, line up or don't. That's completely up to you. And it was absolute chaos the second the doors opened on day one.
That is incredible. That's fire, dude. I love that. I just wanted you to tell that story just for everybody out there. I think it's a good soundbite because there's a lot of, and I can't blame you, but there's a lot of like the Rose Bowl type selling and the load in selling and people coming in and doing deals and people that, rightfully so, they're spending a lot of money with these vendors. And so they come in and they're big in the community and, they've already talked to them. And so they come in and they make deals before and other people feel certain ways about it. And I think it's all a part of it. So regardless, it's going to happen whether
Yeah.
you want it or not. But I think personally, the way that you approached it and making them wait and making them actually just come to the event, uh, I I have to say I think it ends up in more money for you because if you're doing bulk deals and you're just doing deals with people before, they're gonna try and nickel and dime you, and they're gonna get it. So like just know what you have and stand on it.
Yeah. There's no data backing up whether or not the way I did it, was the right way, but it's the right way for me. And I'll tell you that, once again, not to toot my own horn or whatever, but you said hypothetically, there's no guarantees that this is true, but I apparently had one of the best weekends or, you know, numbered gross out of ThriftCon history. And once again, it has nothing to do with maybe the first 10 minutes of those doors being open. But at the same time, it could have everything to do with it because I made my friends, who are those people who show up early and they sell, or sorry, they buy from vendors. Those are all my friends. I like all those people. But that is a part that I'm not willing to do. But I know for certain that the second that we do open up our booth, those fuckers are going to be there anyway,
Right,
and they
right,
know they know they're going to spend the money.
for sure.
So if everybody sees chaos at the booth, they go, "What the?" They have no idea who we are. Hypothetically, if they have no clue who they are, but they see there's no line anywhere else at any other booth, hypothetically, what does that make us look like? It makes us look like we're doing something right to the either the untrained eye or the person that doesn't know who we are.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, okay, let's get into this now. You've been I feel like the entire even almost every question I've asked you, it's been like, yeah, yeah, we'll get into the big collection. So you
It's hard to dance around.
dance around, and I think it was really, I mean, it's a monumental moment in vintage this year, but just in vintage in general, in terms of secondhand, the growth of the industry. Um, what is Frank the big collection? What have you been referring to? Take us through. Yeah, what happened this year? What Tell us about this deal that you've done recently.
All right, so this is this is a long it's a long story to where I physically I had to call several people that were involved to kind of like piece out the time frame of this whole thing. This is what is it, maybe 4 years in the making, where it all started when we were doing those vintage tours. The story I basically call the collection. It's the collection story. And it started in spring of 2021, where Jay Val and I, my partner in this travel, we we started doing the vintage tours, and in the process, we were hitting those big events, and it landed us in Texas at whatever event it was on one of the weekends, and we stayed in town or something like that, and a buddy of mine who is a big buyer in the space, or was a big buyer in the space, was like, "Hey, you should come to Austin." And we were like, "Oh, why? Like, what's the?" And not that we were against it, but it was, oh, well, like, what do we stop? Yeah, just do the same thing. You'll stop and we'll do a buy and trade. Yeah, all right, cool, whatever. It's with our friend Eric, and I was like, "Oh, Eric, okay. He's not like he's never shown himself. He doesn't post anything. Does he have like a big collection? Yeah, he's a big buyer. Oh, okay." And we knew Eric. Like, if I'll mention his names. I don't know who will know him or whatever, but I have a sneaking suspicion that a lot of people who have been around for a while will listen to this because they want to hear about the chaos. So it was our friend Eric in Austin, Texas. But this was through my buddy Steve. Steve worked for Eric. And we knew Eric to be an older guy. Like I said, he didn't ever post his face or shirts or anything. We just knew him as a good buyer. And yeah, you should come to Texas. Okay, so we'll go to Austin after this event, and we'll do our typical trade and buy scenario that we always do. So we pull up maybe like mid afternoon, which was the first mistake, and I'll tell you why. And we walk in, and I can't put in the words, and Mars, you've seen it with your eyes too, but you saw it 4 years later. Um, it is the most unbelievable, unbelievably packed house of organized vintage in the thousands that I've ever seen, ever. And you saw it, Mars, in the bigger house. I have footage going back to this time, spring 2021, in the smaller house where every inch of the house, upstairs and downstairs in the basement, was on those massive double decker racks, all categorized, all with tags on them, things like that. That was our first open up the door, and just for anybody who's listening can't see my face, I'm looking around as if I'm seeing like boobs for the very first time. You know what I mean? It's like
It's
it's
insane. Like
yeah,
like honestly, words don't even do it justice. You can, as much as you can, try to talk about how crazy it was, but seeing it in person, and again, I only saw it. I saw it years after it had already
yeah.
pieces sold from it, all of that, and it was still pretty impressive. Like pretty crazy. I can't imagine seeing it too, just really in its entirety.
Yeah, this was a moment I'll literally, Jay and I will never forget, because there was no context to this other than we're just going in to the same thing that we've done for the past several weeks on that tour of I call it a tour, but that's what it was. We would set up at the shops, whatever, trade and sell. It was whatever. It was fun. But in the thousands, like thousands of thousands, long, I mean, there's a lot to this story, but I know the number later on after I eventually, worked through it, but it was over 10,000 pieces. And I'd say maybe 25% of it at the time was like Depop nonsense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everything else was, anybody be like, "Oh, that's a grail. That's a grail. That's a grail. That's a grail." And like, I'm not using that term lightly like a lot of people do. I'm talking like anything you can think of. There was like 25, 30 mosquito heads at any given time. Every rap tee you can possibly think of. And this is once again 2021. So if you remember the market back then, it was pure chaos. So we walk in, we see the absolute chaos. We're like, what the fuck is going on? Like, I can't even comprehend what I'm looking at. You know what I mean? And just like you said, Mars, it's like, it's hard to put into words, but I have all the footage going back to not the very first time we were there, because that's disrespectful to Eric, when we were in his house and we didn't want to let people know it was like that. But I have footage going back to that summer, when we saw it the second time, which we'll talk about. Um, so yeah, we walk in, we do a deal. We stayed there overnight. We went through thousands upon thousands upon thousands of shirts one by one. We didn't open up any of the bins and stuff like that because we didn't have the time, because we were on a schedule. We were touring. And I remember I personally gave him maybe like 10 grand that day. And we did a bunch. I bought a bunch of stuff from him that I never thought I'd see or get an opportunity to buy again. He wouldn't allow me to buy a lot of stuff. He he was a character, man. Oh, and there's another thing I didn't say. For everybody who's listening who was around back then, this was Erico Suarez. His name is Eric, in vintage, and he was an absolute legendary buyer, unbelievable person. He was very, very nice and kind, an older gentleman who just loved t-shirts, but also understood the business of it all.
Get put in touch with them. Oh, it was through um sorry, your other friend.
Yeah, we knew Eric because he was a buyer and he bought from us, and we met him at events and stuff like that. But we just knew him through Instagram and things like that. He was just a
Okay.
buyer.
Kind of
And,
rubbed up shoulders with him previously.
yeah,
You just didn't know that he had this like the extent of his collection.
I don't think anybody really knew.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of reasons for that. But our middleman, I call him the middleman, but our friend Steve, who worked for him, he was the one that we talked to all the time. He liked the same music. We just became friends, and that's before we even met face to face and whatever. But we didn't know the extent of it. And then Steve and somebody who won't be named, uh, they were kind of helping Eric sell stuff or make a business out of what they had for a long time. But nobody knew it was Eric, because that's just not how they wanted to let the world see it. And that's fine. That's their business. Um, but we didn't know that when we walked into that house, it was going to look the way it looked. So we do all that, and we're blown away. We get a ton of product. We finish out that tour, and abruptly, a couple of months later, while we're on another tour doing the same things, I think that was the summer where we did ThriftCon Denver. I think, don't quote me on that. But we were finishing it out in Miami. We did an event in Miami that was pretty big, and it was close to us. So we were doing that event and then going home. That was the goal. And I get a call from Steve telling us that Eric passed away. And we weren't the closest friends, but like we just spent the night at his house. We talk all the time. We're blown away by this collection. We did a couple of really big deals together. Like, all that just happened a month or two before, whatever it was. So it was shocking, and that was like, wow, that really, really sucks. Like, that's a real bummer at the end of this tour, and we're with a bunch of vintage people at whatever event we were doing, and it was just depressing. And Steve goes, I don't know if you guys are still on the road, but you guys are like the only ones who have like that, number one, that I trust to come here to the house. Apparently, and it's hearsay. This is what Steve told me, and Steve is one of the most genuine people I know. So I don't know why you would lie about this, but apparently he didn't let anybody come into the house like that when he was alive. I don't know why he trusted us to do it. Maybe he was impressed that we did those tours. I don't know that answer, and unfortunately, I'll never know that answer because I never asked him when he was alive. But he let us into his home. So Steve goes, after he passes, goes like, I don't know if you guys are still around, but the family doesn't care about this house. It's not the family house, it's the vintage house. And it was $1 million plus. It was a, a beautiful house in like a rich part of Austin. It wasn't the mansion that I'll talk about later, but it's a beautiful $1 million plus house that was just there as like a side house for vintage. He lived there in one of his rooms, but like, it was a vintage house, which is crazy to say. So he goes, the family doesn't want any of this stuff in here. I don't know what we're going to do with it, but it's not Steve's. It's not the other guy that was sort of involved.
Yeah.
It owned Eric owned it. So the family wants to get rid of it. They just need to get rid of the house. Why they don't live there? The family doesn't live there. They don't need the house. Okay. So I look at JVal and we're down in Miami and I go, do you want to extend it for another, I don't know, week and go to Austin and try to buy whatever we can? We just made a shit ton of money on this tour selling our own product. Like we can go there and spend a little bit more and then we'll go home after that. Sure. So so that's the beginning of this story. This is summer 2021. I'm referring to my notes over here because it's extensive. It gets so crazy. I'm so excited to tell this because I've been holding the story in for 4 years now. I guess going on this summer would be 5 years. Huh.
That's wild.
Yeah,
So it's summer 2021. You guys, that's when you're end in Miami and you go back to look at it.
yeah. So we already know what's there, right? Like we already did the full pick through, and there was another 2 months of him buying or selling whatever was there, and we had nothing to do with it, and that wasn't our business. But there was 2 months in between where there were still things coming into the house that to be sold and stuff I never saw because that's what he did. I remember being there the one day we were there picking through dozens and dozens and dozens of things would just come in the mail and they'd be opening it and sometimes they would just leave it in the package and God knows how long it was sitting in the package and they just got to it whenever they got to it because there wasn't enough space or whatever. There was a full, like, I don't know, 3, 4 bedroom house of the full upstairs was dedicated to only vintage on racks. And then there was a massive basement, same thing, wall to wall, just double decked, like the industrial size double decker racks that can fit 2 to 250 shirts on each top and bottom. You know what I mean? So we're like, yeah, I guess we'll go. So we go and we sit down with Steve and we hug and we're just talking about bullshitting. And he goes, yeah, I don't know what the family's going to do with it. This is like at the time it's like 9,000, 10,000 items. We didn't count it yet, but that's we know because we were just there a month or two prior. So we're doing the whole thing, doing the whole spiel. We're making racks for ourselves, and we don't know how the transaction's going to go because we're dealing with a family that knows nothing about vintage, but Steve's our middleman, so they trust Steve to give them the best price on whatever we're potentially going to buy. And then Steve knows that we're going to mostly resell it. So he's trying to help us in the process without being disrespectful to his friend and his friend's family who passed away. You understand?
Yeah, it's
And
tough
and
transition.
and that's our friend too. Our friend passed away. I don't look at him as a reseller. Like he was our friend too. So I don't
Mhm.
want to disrespect his family either. So like we're trying to come out with this weird middle ground of like, how do we do these deals? So long story short of this moment, we spend all day there and we make our own racks. And in the midst of like, we're finally downstairs in the basement after spending hours upstairs looking through everything. And J Val and I look at each other it, and we just go like, how do we buy this whole thing? Do you have the room for it? No. Do I, meaning me, do I have the room for it? Maybe because one of my roommates at the time just like moved out, and I have at the time a big house in Orlando, and we're looking at how do we do this? Steve comes downstairs. We go, Steve, would you like? Do you think we can make a deal happen to where we pay the family maybe in installments or whatever at that time? And it's weird saying this out loud because a lot of people just don't have this kind of money laying around. But like I had access to a very substantial money. Like I had money that I can put on the table right away as like a down payment, and it's not like 20 grand. It was significant. So at the time, it was like, how can we maybe we can put three of us put it together, and it lives in Austin, whatever, whatever. So this is where things really like make it like get the real the ball starts rolling down the hill. You know what I
Right.
mean? And then the small snowball starts turning into that boulder. So Steve's like, well, and I'm not gonna name names because it's just disrespectful. But Steve's like, I know somebody who did very well for himself. He's very wealthy, and if we're on a time crunch, which we were, the family wanted everything out within the week. So we had like a week to get this done. I don't know how we were going to do it, but Steve goes, I have somebody who can pull the trigger real quick. I just have to, I'm going to have to sit down with him and tell him what we think about it, how much it's worth, how many pieces there are, so on and so forth. So he has that meeting. He comes back to us and he goes, we could do it tomorrow morning. And I was just like, what do you mean? I was like, well, we'll have the talk with the family, and they go, we'll come up with a game plan of what they're willing to sell the entire thing for, everything, and that's that. And I said, well, shit. And in my brain, I go, shit, I just spent like 20 grand on stuff I never thought I'd see again.
Yeah.
So like, I was like, damn, like that sucks for me, but whatever. Uh, so, so we have the sit down. The family's like, well, we can do, I've been torn between if I want to get into like specific numbers. So I'll say the original investment number because I didn't pay this. Who I sold it to did not pay this. What we bought it for, that's what we bought it for. And this was the wealthy gentleman who bought it so it wouldn't get thrown out or donated or whatever it was. He bought it for $225,000, like at a drop of a hat. I think that'll be the only specific time I will mention a real deal number here.
That is, I don't know why I had to do the math on my calculator for that. That's crazy. I just did that on camera. 225,000. That's $22 a t-shirt. If we were saying there's $10,000 or 10,000 t-shirts there, give or take,
Yeah,
22, $23 a t-shirt. I mean, it seems crazy, but it's not as much when you have seen what it was, and like what was there.
yeah,
Because like you said, some of those racks, 30, 25, 30 mosquito heads, all these rap tees, the craziest metal collection, just like a wild metal collection. Um, yeah, there was every good shirt was there. So I mean, you're getting these tees that again in 21, 22, when you're starting to have these conversations. I mean, we're talking about some of those tees are selling for thousands of dollars, and you're getting them all for 22, 23 bucks a pop. So even at how crazy that sounds, quarter million on some t-shirts, I still
it's
think, yeah, it can make
yeah,
sense if you're looking at.
it's the big picture, and we knew what we were looking at. And what, just like you said, it was 2021 when the market was very inflated price wise. So it was in our brains, it was $1 million collection. It just was. And once again, you're never gonna fully grasp what it is because you did not thumb through every single rack one by one. You didn't. It was me, it was Steve, it was Eric, it was J-Val, and it was the other guy who was a partner that we won't talk about. It's just it was only five of us, and then some of the workers that were there too. But I don't think that they really cared. I don't think they were invested in it. It was just they were workers. But it was under 10 people. Nobody ever looked through it. I know it was there. Take my word for it, please. It was the craziest thing you've ever seen, so much crazier than anything that I've ever seen in doing this for a while. No crazier curation ever. Every category you could ever think of, and every shirt from that category that everybody considers as the craziest, it was there at the time. So in our brains, it was $1 million collection. No questions asked by 2021 standards. So
So he buys it for 225, just so it stays intact and stays within your circle.
yeah,
Uh, then what is the plan after that? Where does it go from there? What do you guys try to do with it?
this is the best part. And this is why I had to call J-Val earlier today and go, hey, do I have all these details right? Like, we're getting old. Our brain doesn't work as great as it used to, but we know like the key factors of how ridiculous this is or how ridiculous it was. This is where it gets fun. I mean, that's already fun, but this is where it gets like, from any reseller perspective out here, I hope you're still listening because this is where it gets good, is what I'm about to tell you is so funny, so fucking funny because it's so outrageous how a like a multi millionaire wealthy older person thinks compared to let's just say the average reseller. Who am I? I'm no one. I'm just a guy who sells shirts, but I understand the market. That's all I am. I have a good drive to sell stuff. I have an understanding that I want to work within my bounds or whatever, and then you walk into a room with a guy who's way smarter than you and way more successful than you, and he has a way different outlook on business than I do, or the three of us do. So
He was
that's where this story starts.
very like ones and zeros. Like I know who you're referring to, and yeah, very much just by
Yeah.
the book. Incredibly smart guy, but very different approach than we would take.
I felt so, for lack of a better term, I felt less than to him every time I was with him. And he's very nice. He never treated us in a way like we were stupid ever. But I just any conversation we had, I felt like I was dumber in his presence. And that's a no fault to him. That's my own fault of just not being a, you know, he's very wealthy, very successful. Yeah. So okay, this is where it gets fun. So so we do the deal in the I'd say the late morning, early afternoon of whatever day. He made the phone call, made the wire immediately. Family got the wire, and they were like, "Great, now get it the fuck out of the house." So then it's me, J Val, who are in the touring industry. We've loaded dozens and dozens and maybe hundreds of semi trucks filled with merch in our past and in our career. So the three of us, me, him, and Steve, are like, all right, cool. Let's get a couple of box trucks, and we knew we were going to move it to. Let's pick a name, you and I, right now, for the man who bought this. What do you want to call him? Fred.
Um, yeah, Fred's house.
We'll call him Fred. I refuse. He's great. I just don't want to use his name. It's not cool.
Right.
I don't want to do that. So Fred is like, all right, we can bring it here, which is funny enough, his second house. He uses it as a business house for a business that he runs, but it is a mansion
Yeah, it is.
on the side of the most beautiful mountain overlooking all of Austin that I've ever seen. You should have. I had the same face on that I had when I saw the collection for the first time when I walked into his house and saw his quote unquote backyard, which is just overlooking the craziest mountain in all of Austin. I just looked, I was like, why do I belong here? It makes no sense. And anyway, so yeah, so we move it to this house. Nobody's ever seen this footage either. I filmed everything. I filmed everything. I filmed it from the second we left the very first house, going to the mansion, and then the mansion, so on afterwards. But I've never, I don't know if you want to splice and dice these videos, but I have all the footage. I purposely, from the beginning, have never showed anybody any of this footage. It's crazy. It is crazy. So we move it into this massive secondary house, which again is now turning into a warehouse for vintage, just at a different location in Austin. And we sit down, and this is after doing, like I said, we did those tours for several weeks. And we sit down and we go, okay, so how the hell do we want to do this? And he goes, all right, well, go home for a week, gather your thoughts as a trio. So Jay Val and I live in the same place in Florida, and Steve is in Austin. Gather our thoughts for a week, drive back to Austin when you're ready, and we'll have the conversation on how we sell this. Okay, great. So now we get into September, October 2021. Ready? This is fall 2021. This is what we call the part of this story is the collection is the big name, right? But this part of the story is called the experiment. The experiment is where the wheels fall off the wagon. So
So what?
we move. Say it again.
I just said. So what happens? So what happens once you get it in for the first time to the new house, and you guys come back with the plan?
Yeah. So we come back to the plan and we sit down, and he has this very intimidating, like, like big business CEO roundtable thing in his kitchen, where it's like he'll sit at the head of the table and then all the nobodies like us sit there and try to pitch him ideas and stuff like that. Like that was super intimidating to me. So we sit down to that and they're like, he's like, all right, so how do you want to do this? And I was like, well, I'm the only one who sells like a crazy person here out of the three of us. We do things separately, like in our little niches or whatever, but I was like, and everybody, we all agreed on that. It wasn't like I'm captain. It's just like, I was known to be the seller out of the three more so than the other two. That's all. So I'm coming up. I was like, well, this is what I do, and it was just yeah. I maybe sometimes do auctions and yada yada yada. I do story sales, like the typical nonsense, and then events, like the normal stuff that any reseller would say they do. Great. He goes, well, let's do this. How about this? And this is where it becomes fun. He goes, how about we try to like we source more stuff. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. He goes, yeah, we'll source more stuff, but also we'll go throughout the collection and we'll pull every 13th shirt at random on the racks, every single 13th shirt. And we'll try to sell those under like a fake name on all the reselling sites and see how you do with that. And at the end of that, you know, we'll compare based on the new sourcing that you got that isn't in the collection at all, and then put it up against what you sold with the stuff that was already here at complete random. And I'm like, what? So we have to go pick out of 10,000 shirts, we're going to spend a few hours and like pick out every random shirt and then super detail that and figure out how we want to sell those. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But not through your avenues. Like completely like you're a nobody. Nobody knows you. You're just another person on Depop selling X for whatever price that you think you could sell it for. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. And he goes, yeah, so I'm gonna give you 10 grand right now to go source throughout Texas. And we're like looking at each other like, what the fuck are you talking about? We have 10,000 items here. He goes, yeah, I'll give you another 10 grand to go do it this other way.
That's crazy. And then so he was just I guess the thinking there is he's just trying to see the best way to sell this, you know what I mean? And for him, he's like, yeah, 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 well, let's just do this almost like it is really like an experiment. Like let's take these two samples, sourced stuff and then our stuff, you know, try to as best as you can create a level playing field for how that's being sold by having
Yeah.
this new reseller and then see what does better. And kind of
Yeah.
like, okay, trying to gauge the value of what he just got.
He didn't trust me and J Val at all. Like he didn't because he doesn't know us, and that's fine. But Steve was like, no, no, these are the guys. Like
Yeah.
they're the guys to do this with me, with Steve. Steve was like, I need them because I'm not doing this full time. Like I can't sell 10,000 items for you. I just can't do it. These guys, us together as a trio, we can make this happen. So he's like, well, how do you sell this stuff? And I was like, well, just like you, just like me. I was like, you know, flat lays and pictures with my phone, and you know, I measure it and whatever. Such minuscule, typical everyday reseller bullshit. He goes, no, I'm gonna set up this like he's a photographer for fun. Like he did that as like a hobby. So he had like probably $100,000 worth of photography equipment and cameras and everything just in another room in this house. He goes, I'm gonna set up a big thing in my garage for it's like a big photo booth, but it's like Tyra Banks. That was the supermodel, right? It's like
Yeah.
Tyra Banks was coming over for a photo shoot. They were like, it was the craziest setup I've ever seen. And then he's like, yeah, well, here you go. This is how you take the photo. Good luck. And he would fuck off. So it was like the most nonsensical to me way of doing it. But to him, it was big brain. It was like making it the craziest, the best possible avenue of this can't be bad. Like it's going to look great. It's going to sell great according to you. You know, you guys apparently know everything, but I'm going to do it the best way that I think I can do it from a person who knows nothing about vintage. That was his perspective.
How do we make this the most efficient possible?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it turned out to just being not efficient at all. At
Right.
all. It took forever. It took it took literally forever. I'm using a camera that I've never used before. It's if I drop it, I'll probably owe him 30 grand. Like that's how I thought. We're in this dude's house. Oh, that's another thing I didn't even talk about. When we came back to have this conversation, he's like, "What you know, you guys can't do this for free. You're, I if we're gonna sell my product, I'm gonna have to pay you to be doing this. So what do you guys get paid?" And J Val and I told him, I was like, "Well, like a regular week on any given like Alanis Morissette tour that I did is this price on any given week." He goes, "Okay, cool. We'll pay you that to be here for a week." And I was like, "That's a like great for me. That's like a big tour, 15,000 tickets sold every day. I'm the merch manager on that tour." So he's not just paying me that, he's paying JVal that. And then I forget whatever deal he did with Steve, but like we're all getting paid to pay attention to this experiment. And I was like, "Whoa." He's like, "Yeah, we'll do it for a month. Can you guys stay here for a month?" I sure, I guess. All right, we'll put you in this hotel, uh, in Austin. So we stayed in Austin for a month doing this.
Wild. How did it
Yeah.
go? What were the results then of this first experimental phase?
Yeah. So I can gloss over a couple of things, but just know like we used that 10 grand. I don't know if we spent all of it, but we sourced around Texas. And he's like, "What are these rag house things that I've Googled and stuff like that?" And I was like, "We don't have that. I can meet certain people, but I don't think they're just going to let us in." He goes, "Oh, okay. Well, here's 10 grand. Just do it." So we went to some shops. We did a little event in San Antonio at a friend's pop up that they happened to be doing at the time we were there. Nobody knew why we were in Texas because they knew we weren't promoting a tour. So we had to like lie that why we were there. And we're like, "Oh, yeah, we came for the weekend, whatever." So like we did that. We went all the way out to El Paso, which if you look at a map, Austin to El Paso, there's nothing in between. And it's very, very far. So like we really tried to source and we got some okay stuff, but it was like there was no plan. It was like, "Yeah, do it now. Do it this weekend." We were like, "What the fuck are we doing?" We looked at it as a big waste of time. So let me look at my notes over here. So we do the sourcing and we're starting to like make this really big uh what do you call that? Jesus Christ. Spread. We started to make this really big spreadsheet because he wanted us to document every single shirt that we took out of every 13th shirt. Do you remember what I said? We took a shirt off there. So he wants to document it. He wants us to take a photo of it, write down exactly what it is, what we think it's worth, what the measurements are, and it took forever. It took forever. I forget how many we pulled off the shelves, but we did that for what we bought in the sourcing trip with 10 grand and what we took off of the racks, which, like I said, there were 10,000 shirts there. So I don't know, you'd have to do the math on every 13th shirt, however many that was. But we did that for everything. So that took like a week to document exactly how he wanted to do all the photos and everything. And that's before we listed a damn thing. And if everybody who has a death pile sitting out there knows how long that shit takes to list stuff, that takes just as long if you want to do it the correct way, exactly how he wanted it to do. It takes just as long as the documentation is on every single shirt that you did. Some of these shirts are worth $20. Some of them are worth 700 to 1,000. It's just the nature of what we pulled at the moment. So it took forever.
Yeah. Oh God, I can't imagine. That's one of my least. I mean, I'm sure not just mine. It's a
Yeah.
popular. It sucks doing that
Yeah.
photographing, and really, I mean, you guys were going extra with it too, with the camera set up, and you got the spreadsheet you're filling out, and like, oh my
It,
God, that
it was the most like, and like every time he said do this and do this, I was like, I get it. But I'm like, dude, if you want to make what's that Will Ferrell movie where he's like, it was not even Will Ferrell, I think it's Mark Wahlberg, where he goes, "You just gotta let me fly. You gotta let me open up my wings and fly." Like that was my whole mindset. I'm like, let me just do what I know how to do. And fuck, we'll make $1 million off of this thing, but you gotta like trust me. He goes, "No, no, let's see how the experiment goes first." I'm like, "Well, it's your stuff. I didn't drop $250,000 on it. It's not my money. I'm getting
right.
paid to be here. So if you want to pay me for a month of being here while I can't tour because we're still in COVID times, I guess you're going to pay me to be here and do it how you want to do. This guy is now my boss. It's my boss. It's JVal's boss. It's Steve's boss. So in the midst of doing all this documentation and photos and everything, he starts calling over like $1 million+ marketing teams to have business conversations with us. And we're trying to explain to him like, or them, like these are really professional people. Like we're trying to explain to them what we do and how we do it. And like, they're like, well, all right, it's going to cost maybe like, I don't know, 10 grand a month or whatever it was to like promote it correctly. I'm like, what? I'm like, just learn Facebook ads or something. Like, I don't know. Like, this doesn't make any sense to me. And like,
Yeah.
these are guys that like work with like T-Mobile on their like promotions and stuff like, you know what I mean? Like big billion-dollar companies. And then there's us who are just like selling like Slipknot shirts and like NASCAR AOPs. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it makes no fucking sense.
Like the whole thing is yeah, it's just you can, and which I'm sure the story will tell, but you can try to think so black and white about it, and you can really try to approach it as if it is this big business or industry. But at the end of the day, you just it's you have to be tapped in. You have to understand how to speak the same language as the people you want to get these things off to. It's just you got to figure out how to get it in front of the right community. And I think vintage was in such a space that you really had to kind of be a part of that community if you wanted to
Yeah.
get it.
Yeah, I think he learned that at towards the end of what we call the experiment. And I was having like a towards the end of that, and we were there, we were living at a hotel, which isn't unnormal for me, or it's just it's not out of the norm of what J Val and I do because on tour, we're either in a tour bus or on off days, we're in hotels. But we were we were living at a hotel for a month in a place where we're not from and doing only vintage from like 10 a.m. or noon or whatever until 10 p.m. every single night on somebody else's way of doing it, not how we were used to doing it. So, and under a disguised name online on Depop and eBay and Grailed, we did it under a fake name. I think we called it SJF Vintage because it was the first letter of each of our names or something like that. And nobody knew. It started out with no feedback. You know, it was a typical brand new selling platform online. Doesn't matter. Anyway, so I was having a really hard time towards the end of that. Like I had like a mental breakdown where it wasn't fun for any of the three of us, and I started getting like really angry at everybody and just like being like, "What the like? Why the fuck are we doing?" You know, I was just getting really aggravated, and I was still hosting. Some of you guys know if you're listening to this, I hosted a band tea auction live for like 2 years, where I did two shows a week for 4 hours each episode. I did over 100 episodes over a course of, I think it was 2 years that I did it, where it was only band teas. So I was still hosting those while we were doing this trip because I told him, I was like, yeah, you're going to pay me, but like, I have a job. I have people literally months behind that have already paid me to host these auctions. And this is before Whatnot even existed. They were really popular at one time, like hundreds of people every episode. Like it was that nonsense. It's just what it was. So I was like, I'm not stopping any of that to do this shit when they've already paid me to do it, and that's it. And he agreed and whatever. So I was just having a really hard time because I was trying to figure out how to do both at the same time, and then I was just so frustrated to where it wasn't fun anymore. It was becoming not fun, and the guys and myself were getting really irritable with each other, and it just wasn't fun. So the experiment kind of concludes. It's now like October 2021, and he goes, okay, now you guys can go home. This will stay here. We're not going to sell it anymore. We're going to document all the earnings and what we sold in that month or two or whatever, or continue to sell the stuff online. I'll give you an ending date, and then we'll take everything off the websites, the Depops, the Grail, the eBay, and then we'll compare what each platform made and how you know mathematically what that equates to what the full collection will eventually sell for. And I'm like, yeah, but that doesn't make sense because there's things that are in there that are like $2,000 shirts, and then there's like $10 shirts. I'm like, what? And he's like, yeah, but mathematically I have a way. And I'm like, you know what? I can't even say that you're wrong because you're way smarter than I am. You're the millionaire here. I'm just fucking jabroni. so so we go
He did
home. We
he did love the formulas. And
yeah, he was. I can't
God,
stress enough. Fred, quote unquote, for people who are just listening, Fred is a he's a very smart human. It's just we didn't see eye to eye on things. So we get home. We get home. The three of us, me, Steve, J Val, are talking about it. We're like, all right, so here's the number it equated to, and I don't remember what it was. Let's just say it's 50 grand. I really don't know. I don't remember. It's probably in a spreadsheet somewhere, but the end of the story equates to just us. Like I don't want to look at this anymore. So um, we come up with all the data. We come back to him maybe a couple weeks later. We're like, all right, here's all the data. Here's what we made with your version and our version of the experiment. Now we're home. Steve is still there. And long story short, within this conversation, he goes, well, it's not that impressive to me. I don't think we're going to make the money that you guys think we're going to make on this. And I'm like, yeah, but you know why it didn't happen the way you wanted it. I was like, because you didn't let me sell it how I would regularly sell it, whether it's through my avenue of I'm Frank TWWK. Hi, I'm the guy who has a face in the community. That's JVal. We tour together and we do these vintage events together. Everybody knows JVal too, and everybody knows Steve because he was originally a guy who sold that stuff with that other person prior to Eric's death. Like we're all people in this community that people know. If you do it blindly and through your perspective of vintage when you don't know anything about it, it's not going to go the same way. So you didn't make enough money on the experiment when you didn't let us do it the way we know how to make you the most amount of money. You know what I mean?
right.
So so he wasn't happy. So I would go, well, how about, I was like, let me buy it then. I'll pay you in installments and then the three of us will work on it or we won't. And I don't know, we'll figure it out. But he goes, nah, I'll think about it. I'll think about it. So we thought about it. And in the meantime, the three of us are talking. I'm like, what the fuck are we doing here? Like, this is ridiculous. I'm like, what is he going to do with it? He's a wealthy man who runs businesses and he doesn't want anything to do with it. He's just helping out Steve and got it out of, so it didn't go into obscurity wherever it would have landed. I don't know where it would have landed, but so it's like, what are they going to do? And Steve ultimately goes, well, Steve is I'm not going to tell you what Steve does. One of my closest friends in vintage community. He's an amazing person, but it's not my place to say what he does. He has a job where he's a manager of a very, very popular set of places. I don't know if you want to call it that, places in Austin. He's a manager of, and he does great with his career, but it's not vintage. You know what I mean? We're all adults. We have other jobs outside of vintage. And he goes, I can't now dedicate my life to this. I already have my job, And I was like, yeah, no, I guess I understand, but what the fuck were you going to do if he said, yes, we're going to continue on with this? So like, you're screwing us over. I was furious with Steve, furious. And it became real bad. It was not a friendship anymore. It got to the point where I was so frustrated and I was already aggravated with Fred, quote unquote, saying, I don't trust you to do this anymore. So figure it out. You guys now figure it out. And now Steve is out of the picture because he's like, I can't make it my full-time thing. And then J Val and I, who are very, very close for many years, are once again at odds with each other, which is bad. And so, what the fuck do you want to do? He goes, well, you know what? I know J Val. He's not as gung ho as I am when I have my mind set on something. He just isn't, and he'll be the first to tell you. Also, he's just not that way, and that's fine. That's just the personality in which he has, and that's why we get along so well. It's because if I'm gonna force my hand into something, he'll be like, you know what, he's probably right. And then there's times where he's like, I don't think that's a good idea, and I'll take his advice because he's probably thinking more logically than I am. We mesh together great. He's one of my closest friends. JVL, I know you're going to listen to this. I love you. Thank you for being along on this ride with me because, we couldn't do this without each other. That's the God honest truth. Um, so, so the three of us split and now it's over. I don't know what's going to happen. Steve doesn't want to do it full time. And now we're in December 2021 going into fall and winter 2022. where like now it's gone. It's like, well, I'm going to still try to figure out like, do I get a loan? Like I know exactly how much he paid us. I know exactly how much he spent on the collection. What can we do here? Like, okay, so I start asking my father. I was like, I have this amount of money, but he doesn't want to do it in installments. My dad's like, fuck you. Like, why would I? No way. And like my dad isn't an idiot, but he wasn't going to give me the the next amount of money I needed to complete the
Yeah.
transaction. And then like I started talking to more wealthy folk in the vintage space. Like I asked a couple of people who I thought, just from knowing people, I know a lot of people that do this. There's a lot of small brains out there who just do it on a very small level, and that's fine. It's not a, who cares? But I needed that shark. I needed a shark to be like, do you see what I'm talking about here? Like, this is a this is possibly the craziest thing that anybody's ever done in this space outside of like a few, obviously the few people like that dude in South Florida who is like the number one eBay seller ever uh, in vintage
Probably
clothing. No,
Ryan.
not
Yeah.
Ryan. I love Ryan, but no,
Because
fuck.
that's what I'd have been talking about.
Yeah. So anyway, that's besides the point. So this goes on for a while, and I come back to him like, all right, I can get you like I think it was over 100 grand, whatever it was. And once again, this is fall and winter of 2022, early 2022. And the reason I know this is because I toured for the remainder of that year, and that's where I saw you on the JID tour. That was my
Mhm.
first tour of the year. So I call him up again. I go, I can give you like 100 grand. Like, if you want to hold it until I'm back from this tour or whatever. But that's what I can do, like comfortably without like putting myself in a bad position. Cash or like wire right now. Like I can make this happen. And
Yeah.
he goes, no, I'm gonna sell it myself. And I was like, what do you mean? I was like, Steve doesn't want to do it, and Steve and I are not talking at this point. And I made it very clear to Fred. I was just like, we're not dealing with each other anymore. I'm furious. Like he doesn't want. This is putting the whole thing in jeopardy now. You don't know what you're talking about, and I said that respectfully, not in those words. I was like, but you
Right.
don't know vintage at all, and you're just going off of what we said, but based on what we could do together as a trio. And we had a big fight. And I was like, ultimately, I was like, you know what? In other words, I was like, fuck you. I was like, you need me. I don't need you. I can go on doing vintage. And if I don't want to do vintage anymore, I can go back to touring. And that's what I did. I went back to touring. And I was connected to all the emails and the Depops and the Grailed and the eBays. And I saw what they were doing and what they were selling. And ultimately they used Steve as like a mediator of like, all right, this is what this is worth, and we can put it on eBay and so on and so forth under that fake vintage name. They did that for like a couple of months, and then they stopped doing it. And I was still on all those emails, so I saw what they sold, I saw what they were selling stuff for. In the meantime, I was so down on myself because I couldn't get the deal done. And like I call my dad, and my dad and I are very close. I call my dad, and I was like, it doesn't make me sound cool or anything like that, but I'd call my dad and I'd be like, I'd break down and like cried about it because like when I put my mind to something, and like for people that don't know me on a personal level, when I put my mind to something, like I really go for it. I was in a band for 10 years. We got signed a bunch of times. We toured all over the world, released records that were in stores and everywhere, free streaming. Like we did that. And then I put that to bed. After that, I started a clothing company just because I was so broke. I needed to eat. Sold thousands and thousands and thousands of shirts, put that to sleep. It did what it needed to do. Once I got into vintage and I was like, all right, fuck yeah, I'm going gung ho on this. And like, I couldn't complete the deal, the big like the deal, and I was so down on myself about it, and it was almost pathetic. Like I was very upset, and like I'd like call my father and like cry about it and be like, not cry, but I was there were times where I cried, but I was just very upset. We were trying to come up with a detailed way to figure it out, and neither one of us were willing to do what once again Fred wanted to do. So the whole year passes, all of 2022 passes, and I'm sitting in my hotel room on a specific tour. I don't know what tour it was on an off day, and I get a phone call, and I look down, and it's Fred, and I go, "What the fuck is he calling me for?" And he goes, "Hey, just wanted to see how you're doing. I think I'm interested in selling again. We took several months off. We just didn't have the time to do it, so it's still sitting here in the house on the hill in Austin, that beautiful big house. And and he goes, "Are you interested in selling with me again?" And I said, "Yeah, I mean, I guess so, but like, what's the deal? Like, I don't have the money that you want to just buy it outright." He goes, "I think," and this is something I don't know if you know. I was like, "I think I'll do 50-50 split with you." And I was like, "Dude, no way! Like 50-50 split is insane because it's at no cost to me. If a shirt that is $500 only sells for 250 for whatever the particular reason is, because he's like, yeah, you could do auctions and stuff. Don't make that just the only way you sell, but if an auction doesn't go your way, it's like, all right, we'll take the hit on it. So like in my brain, I'm like, holy shit, if something doesn't sell at full price, I'm not going to fuck them over, but like if something doesn't sell at full price, it doesn't matter so much to me. Yeah, I'll make slightly less more money also, but it's not my bottom line, my bottom dollar. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I did that for like 3 or 4 months because it was at the end of 2022. And like I told you at the very beginning of this conversation, I would always try to take November, December, January off. So like perfect time to get access to all that stuff because it was the holiday season. Like Black Friday didn't hit yet. So I was doing I went so nuts. He sent me 300, no, it was sorry, 700 shirts at a time, and I didn't have to go to Austin. He did it his way. He did the experiment way, but he said, you sell it how you want to sell it. I'm going to pick them out at random like we used to do it, but I'm going to send you 700 shirts at a time. I don't know how long it'll take you to sell them, but sell them at whatever you think you can sell them for. Come back to me when you're done with the first 700. Give me the details. We'll have a talk on the phone every week about the progress. And then if we want to keep doing this, we keep doing this. So that was step two. And at that time, I was like, this is incredible for me because it was like, it makes me look like $1 million. Like I have all this crazy product, and it makes me look like I just came up with the craziest hauls of all time. And I don't want to give away my stance on this collection because I still want to buy it if I can, but that wasn't the intention. I was like, all right, 50-50, great. It makes me look like I'm the fucking man because I have all this crazy stuff. And so be it. I mean, I was making money off of it. It was great, but it was just me. J Val was out. I think he was touring again, and Steve was doing his thing. And I went on tour that somewhere around then, and Steve and I did make up, and we talked it out. And I told him what we were doing with the 50-50 split, and I apologized to him. He apologized to me. We understood. We're just friends at the time, having a really frustrating moment in our friendship based on the circumstances of this whole collection deal. So we made up, and so on and so forth. So at the end of us selling, or sorry, at the end of me selling the 50-50 split, I think it was like into January at that time. I was like, I sold everything. And then he sent me another 700 shirts or whatever, sold everything from that. And then it was like January. And I was like, all right, hey, listen up. So I'm going to probably go on tour soon. I think I may be signed on to a tour because now we're into, I think it's, yeah, early. Yeah. So early, yeah, early 2023 now. We're in early 2023. And I'm like, I'm probably going to go on tour soon. I try to only take off like in January, maybe some of February. So like, what do you want to do here? He goes, I'm not happy with this either. How about we do it like 80-20? And I'm like, 80-20 is fucking psychotic. I'm like, you know nothing. Why am I going to spend all of my time to do 80-20 to you? I was like, do you have any idea how long it takes to sell 700 t-shirts when you don't know what you're doing? It takes me forever, and I know what the fuck I'm doing. So it was that standoff again of just like, what do we do here? It makes no fucking sense. I was very frustrated yet again, and it got to the point where I was like, all right, I'll buy it. I'll buy it again. I'll buy it from you outright. What do you want? And he just didn't budge from. He wanted to make me pay for the experiment costs, which was everything that we were paid from him, and whatever he wanted for the entire collection. And I was like, it
That's all.
makes no sense. Why would I pay what you paid me to do, you know, you know what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say. I just like there's no reason I should be paying for what I did for you. It makes no sense. on top of a price I'm not willing to pay for all these shirts because we're getting later and later into years now where it's not 2021 prices anymore. And that's not my fault. That's your fault because you didn't let us just spread our wings and fucking fly at the beginning, or else you would have been, we probably would have sold, maybe not everything by that time, but we were 2 years in. If you just let us go, maybe we
Yeah.
did sell everything and maybe we did make $1 million. I'll never know. And it's just, it's something that'll never be known. But we're now in early 2023 or whatever. And I'm just like, yeah, man, all right, I guess we're not going to get this deal ever. It'll never be done. So this is where ThriftCon comes into play. Are you ready for this? And you might know the details of the story. Do you know
I
what I'm about to
might
say?
not. I mean, I know. Well, I know obviously that then this is where we get the invite to go down to Austin ourselves.
Yeah.
Joe Joe gets in touch with Steve, and Steve puts us in touch with Fred, and we kind of get wind of what's sitting down there in Austin. And Joe's just like, no, it's apparently it's the craziest collection, thousands of shirts, just wild stuff. Kind of gives us the rundown, everything we've just spoke about. We hop on a flight. I think it was January 2023. Hop on a flight, or no, was it this year?
It was later. It was late. It was into 2024.
Or yeah. So it was January of last year. We hopped on our
Yep.
flight and went down, checked it out, did the exact same thing, had all of the same kind of experiences, pull up to this mansion filled with vintage in it and kind of just, where are we at? Talk to Fred and get his kind of very buttoned up business suit way of looking at things and how he wants to approach it, and we hear about it. And so we spend an entire night looking through the collection, doing the same thing, value, like kind of evaluating it ourselves. How many pieces do we think are here? What do we think the actual worth of this, which is incredibly hard to do, by the way. Like, we're going down there to maybe make a deal for this collection, and we have booked 3 days in Austin. And
Yep.
so, first night to be like, okay, let's sit here and value this. We really didn't know what we were walking into. And yeah, it was a pretty insurmountable task, to say the least. But we did the best that we could with the information we were provided and the time that we had. Spent the next day talking to Fred at a coffee shop about the collection and what we thought it was worth, what we felt comfortable offering him for it. And also, me being me, I couldn't help myself, but had to take a couple clips and videos. I mean, we were videoing the whole thing. We brought our video dude and told him that prior, but then I just on my phone took some clips while we were in there. I think I posted some of the mosquito heads, and I just like had a few stories that I put, and I just use it for ammo on the ThriftCon story, just as a very cheeky kind of like, because at that point, like yourself, you were the only other person that had seen it. No one would have known what they were looking at. It was just a
Nobody
very
knew for years.
thing that I was posting. So I'm like, oh, this is pretty harmless. Like, I'm just gonna put this on the story. It's a cool story. Something's in the works, whatever. Um, and then you obviously then saw that story.
Yeah. So, so I want to say it was 2023, we come to that conclusion that after doing the 50-50 split, it was just wasn't going to happen. For the second time, this deal was dead in the water. We tried. I thumbed through everything a million times. I knew exactly what was there. I did everything in my power to where I tried to make it work for the both of us, to where I think I even offered probably the exact number or whatever, what was left based on what I knew was still there versus how much we sold from it. So like we're down now to like, by the end of the second batch of me selling, maybe down to like 7,000 or 7,500 items out of the original 10,000, something like that. So deal number one, again, is dead in the water mid 2023. So just like you said, at the end of December or very, very early January, whatever it was, of 2024, right? No, no, sorry. At the end of 2023 into the very beginning of January 2024, I see that post that you put up on ThriftCon where it's a reel or whatever of the mosquito heads. And just like you said, everybody's like, oh, yeah, it's just a lot of mosquito heads. Nobody knew anything. I looked at it. I knew exactly what I was staring at because of the hangers, because of the little tags that were on the hangers, not the tags on the shirts. There were little tags on the specific hangers, whether they had little prices on them or they had little code words based on the category that they were in. I knew what I was looking at. J Val, if he would have saw the post first, he would have said the same thing. I know exactly what that is. That's the experiment. That's the collection. But the untrained eye to what it was would never know. They just knew, oh yeah, mosquito heads. I was like the first thing I woke up to. And I remember waking up that day. I opened up my Instagram. I just saw that reel and I was like, what the fuck? I was like, no way. No fucking way is he selling the collection right now. I was like, I didn't even know he was selling it again. Like, what's the problem here? So I was, I freaked out, like freaked out. And I called Steve right away. Like I said, we mended fences, everything was fine. We were friends again. So like it wasn't a problem that I called him out of the blue. Call him like, dude, what's happening? And he goes, yeah, well, yeah, I mean, you weren't interested. I was like, yes, I was. I was like, I fucking told him time and time again, Fred. I was like, I'll do it. But I was like, what? So what's the deal? I was like, well, ThriftCon is going to come out here or came out here or whatever. And it didn't work out. And I was like, oh, thank God. And no offense to you guys, but
Now, way less money than he wanted. He lowballed the fuck out of him, which probably helped.
yeah,
Because I saw it, and I mean, same thing, man. I mean, I'm looking. You got to look at us too. Like we're not really in the business of reselling. I mean, have I done? Did I do it for years before we did ThriftCon? Do we understand that world immensely? Yes,
yes.
but it's not our business model right now. That's not what we're actively doing, and we're busy enough just trying to double up on events this year, do all the things we want to do, throwing in trying to sell 7,500 shirts, and it just wasn't in the cards. So we're like, if we're gonna do this, we got to get it for a steal,
Yeah,
which let us have it for.
yeah. So, so that worked to my advantage.
Yeah,
You guys not making the deal happen for whatever the scenario is, that worked for me. And I knew nothing. I just walked in going, what the fuck? Like I was interested. Why didn't you come back to me? They said whatever they said. I don't remember, but it was just like, well, we didn't come back to you. We didn't think you were interested anymore. I was like, well, it's because you guys are stupid about it, but whatever. I'm interested. Like, get me back in there. So I get on the phone with Fred and, and I go, man, what are you doing? He goes, well, they didn't value it how I thought they would. And I was like, yeah, but they have no idea what you put into it. And no wonder they undervalued it. And that's not your guys' fault at all. Just like you said, Mars, that's not your fault. It's just you're trying to get the collection for the best price
yeah.
at
I was gonna
what
say,
yeah.
trying to tell lower than what he thinks it's worth too, because we were just trying to get the best deal possible. So we're like, bro, it's not worth anything, bro. What are you? You're gonna just lose all the money on it.
Yeah.
We're just
That's the funniest part because we're still just at the end of the day, like we are resellers. Like we know we you don't walk up to somebody's collection and go like who doesn't know anything about anything and go, yeah, dude, that's $1,000 shirt when it's $1,000 shirt. You don't say that.
right.
So like at the end of the day, we're all just resellers. So they undervalued it, but they don't. You guys didn't know what we put into it, and I know everything super detailed to the pricing, what they paid us. Like I said, like I knew everything, and I go, okay, here's my final attempt at this. This is the third time. Now this is I'm looking at my notes. It was December from December 2021 or whatever. Oh no, that's so yeah, this is my final go at it. It was spring 2021 all the way up to January 2024. So you have a full 3 year scenario of just negotiation and experiments and everything before I was like, my final pitch. Here you go. Have at it. This is my last chance. This is your last chance as somebody who's going to have a real serious buyer to give you exactly what he knows it's worth. And I said, the reason why it's my last chance is because I'm either going to buy this collection or I'm going to buy a fucking house. And that's a crazy thing to say as an adult. Are you going to buy 8,000 t-shirts or 7,000 t-shirts, or are you going to buy a fucking house? Like it's a crazy thing to say. And I said, but once that money is gone and it's into the house or whatever I was going to do, I was like, the collection is out of my mind. I will never think about it again. This is the last chance. So he goes, okay, fly out here. And this is right before, like I said, this is last year now, 2024, January. I said, I have a 2 week window where I had this phone conversation from when I was going on. I went to I had a tour in uh, Australia and Japan coming up, and I had a 2 week window to make the deal happen. I said, okay, I'm going to fly out on Tuesday or whatever of next week, and I'm going to stay there. I'm going to thumb through every single thing one more time. I know it's there, but I'm going to do it really strategically and like data minded, just like you like. And I went through, it was like 30 racks or whatever it was, or sorry, 20 racks and like 15 black and yellow tubs filled to the brim. I like went through it really meticulously, wrote down my thoughts on each rack. I numbered each rack and said, this rack's good and here's why, and so on and so forth. I did it like a pure psychopath, exactly how I thought he would like to hear it if I was going to
Yeah.
make a pitch, like a crazy person. So I did all this. I went back to my hotel that night. I called Steve and I'm like, Steve, I'm going to have that breakfast meeting tomorrow. Steve's going to be there. Fred was going to be there and I was going to make my final pitch. I was like, and then I talked to him. I was like, what do you think about this? And he goes, yeah, I mean, just do the best you can. And that number sounds like it's logical, whatever. So spent all night. I couldn't sleep. I like wrote it. I like had pieces of paper. I was writing out like graphs and diagrams and percentages and all this stuff and stuff I just don't do. Like I have a spreadsheet of everything I've sold ever, everything I've ever sold and what I spent on it and things like that. So like I know at any given time what I've made or lost on any item I've sold over the past God knows how many years, because that's just how I am as a person. A lot of people don't do that, but I've never done it so specifically like I was doing on this piece of paper in order to make this pitch. So I I get it together and I come up with a number. And like I said, I told you what he paid, but I don't want to get into specifics of what I bought it for, but you'll understand just how I explain this. I had to take into consideration what he paid, what we sold of the past 3 years, what we sold those things for, and also what he paid all of us to do those things. Then also the the trip where he gave us 10 grand to go source, how much we spent there. I knew everything. So I took that all into consideration. I sat down at breakfast and I said, in less words, or in more words rather, I said, this is what I'm willing to pay, and here's why. And I said that in a crazy, I told him in a crazy way how I would do it. And he looked at me, he goes, I'm very impressed in how you did this. That is the absolute lowest number I would even consider taking. And he shook my hand and we did the deal. And let me explain to you for the listener. Um, it's over six figures. I'm a lucky enough person to have a good savings for myself, and I've worked very hard for 20 years to have a savings to where I can work within that. But that's between me selling merch, sorry, that's between me selling vintage and me having a career outside of vintage. So I have the ability of saving for a house, but doing this deal, and I was able to do a six-figure deal with him way under what he paid, but that's because we sold a lot of stuff out of that collection also. So if you understand it, it leveled out to be in my favor because it wasn't 2021 pricing anymore. It was 2024 pricing. And I said, this is also what we already made for you. So I'm not paying that. It doesn't make any sense. So it worked in my favor where we did the deal. And I was able to do that in January 2024 before I left for the entire year of touring.
Yeah, man. I bet that felt so good to finally like shake the hands, make the transaction. I mean, I bet it didn't feel good.
No.
Spend like transfer
I
that that hurt a little bit, but getting it done had to feel amazing.
when we shook hands and he left, he called me. I remember Steve and I went to. I think we just finished our breakfast or whatever. He left. He said, "I'll give you a call in an hour, and then I'll just be like, yeah, we're good to go, and like let me just sit on it for an hour." But he shook my hand. He's like, we're gonna do it, but just give me an hour just to reevaluate some things and whatever, take into consideration what you said. And okay, sure. He calls me and we did the deal, and I got off the phone with him. He said yes, take care of it and whatever. And I called my father, and I cried my eyes out. That's legitimate. Like I worked so hard for 3 years. I, it's not just me. It was all of us. It was Steve and J Val. I did the deal at the end of the day, but we worked so hard to make that work. And I was so thankful to have Steve there because we hugged, and he was blown away that we got the deal done. It took so long and so much out of me. To somebody who just wasn't in it like that, it's just like, oh yeah, you bought a lot of shirts. Like, who cares? Like, I can't tell you how much we fucking effort we put into that for 3 years. I thought about it every day, every fucking day. I was just made me miserable at times. It made me so happy at times, but to get the deal done was unbelievable.
That's incredible stuff, dude. Pretty inspiring. Um, just in terms of in the vintage space and other sellers, it's really like you said, big picture. It can be so much larger than I think a lot of people realize.
Yeah. It's a matter of what you're willing to put into it and your drive as a person. If you're willing to put in everything you have into creating an opportunity for yourself, try to make it happen. But it rests on your shoulders. If you're not willing to put in that crazy work, then you'll fail. It's just the nature of the beast. I trusted myself to literally pick t-shirts over the house that I was going to buy because I knew what I could do with that opportunity. That's it.
So then to wrap it up, and I think to really tie this all together, what did you still have the shirts, or what did you end up doing with that opportunity? We're now 1 year later. You got the shirts in January 2024, or you made the deal in January 2024. We're February 2025 now. What's
So
come of?
what's come of the collection?
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
the funny part is it's sad again. It's sad again because that was never the plan. I never thought I'd have the opportunity to grab it. The good part for me was that I didn't bankrupt myself. I had money where I could survive, but I also was touring. I had a touring schedule ready to go for all of 2024. I knew what I was going to do like for basically the whole year. The downside to that is I only had like a few days to get it to my house, and I called up J Val after I did we're like I said we're very close. I called up J Val. I said, I did the deal. I can't believe it. I did the deal. And he was baffled by it because I purposely didn't tell him that Fred and I started talking again. And he was blown away. And I said, I want you to be there with me. I said, we started this and we had a moment on the phone. Like I was just like, we started this together traveling 3 years ago. We saw that collection for the very first time together. I want you to be there when we move it for the last time to my place. And what's good for me is that at this time, all my roommates moved out for various reasons, so I was moving out. I didn't need this big house anymore. That's another thing. I told Fred, I was just like, it's I'm moving, and then I don't have a place to put this stuff anymore. I live in a big house. I have the space right now. It can work. My house will be a literal warehouse, but it is what it is. So I had the space. It's now or never. The deal got done. My house turned into a warehouse. Me, Steve, J Val, we moved it for the very last time to my place from Austin to Florida. Very far trip. We got a 26-foot box truck, and the photos and the videos are just insane. Again, I documented everything. Never shown those photos, never showed those videos, and it's just funny, man. And like we kept it quiet for so long, and I had to go on tour right away. I knew what my schedule was like for all of 2024. So it was just like I called a couple people. You mentioned a name earlier who I'm friends with, Ryan Raleigh. I called him over. I didn't tell him what he was walking into. He lives sort of close by, but he's been here before. We've done some deals together. So I called him over. I called my buddy Trey Jones over. I called my buddy Pat. just to come hang out. Didn't tell them what the deal was. And I filmed all this too. They walked into my house and they had the same look on their face that we had the very first time we saw it. They were they were like, "What the fuck is going on here?"
Yeah.
Uh, it was the best. It was the best. And I asked them. They were like, "What can you? Would you sell the whole thing?" I said, "Of course." Like I know I. It's either take a year off of touring or maybe I try to sell this to somebody. But I'm like, who has the, now I have to go from all that data from all the 3 years. It doesn't matter anymore. None of that matters. Now I know what I paid and I know what I can make if I just do it by myself. And I'm cool with doing it by myself. I have no doubt in my mind I could do it the way that I want to do it. It's just I have to then decide, do I take a year off in touring and sell it gung ho and make, I don't know, $500,000 or more, whatever it may have been. Um, or do I sell it in one lump sum and try to find somebody that can do it? And I had a couple of conversations with a couple of people, and I I had two really serious offers for a number that I put together that I concocted that I was happy with, and one of those options worked out. And I think by now everybody probably knows how it went and who it went to, but um, it was the craziest moment of my entire life. One, when I bought it outright from the collection, but then when I called my father again and said, "I told you I would sell the whole thing," and he's like, "What do you mean?" And I told him I sold the whole collection, and it was he. I told him what for, and I'll leave it as, it's life changing money to anybody who's not already a very wealthy human. You know what I mean? Like, and it's life changing for me, and there's still tons of money to be made with who bought it. And I'm never going to tell anybody what I bought it for, besides the very few people who know, and then what they bought it for, because it's not my business. It's not their business. Sorry, it's not my business to spread that information, and it's disrespectful to them. But they can crush, and I crushed, and everybody's happy because now those thousands and thousands of pieces that were sitting in houses for years on end, not moving, are finally being spread into the world, and we're all able to win on it. And it couldn't have worked out any better. And it's the best decision I have ever made in my entire life.
Hell yeah, man. That's what it's all about. That's good stuff, dude. That's
It
what I
gets me
mean.
it gets me emotional thinking about it because it's
I,
just so fucking outrageous.
it should, dude. I mean, that is a big deal. No pun intended. it, it it really is though. I mean, that is huge. Uh I can't think of any one single larger bundle deal that I've ever heard of going down, let alone it happening, twice. It really it passing through a couple different channels, but I'd agree with you. I still think that it is a win for everybody. I think there's a lot of room, a lot of upside on that still, knowing what I saw. Um, and yeah, dude, I'm stoked for you, man. That's crazy. I'm pumped that it all happened. No jealousy at all on my side. There was no way that we could have done what you did, even if we got our hands on that thing. So
I,
kudos.
I got some messages that were like, "Why didn't you hit me up?" And I was like, "Dude, you don't understand."
Yeah,
I was
bro,
like,
dude.
they were legitimately, and uh you know what? I want to help her. Not that she needs the help. She can do whatever she wants to do. It was her stuff. But I sold it to B. Everybody knows B now, I think. And you know, when these videos make their way on the internet, I'll tag her and everything. But like, um, uh, there were two very serious options. Very serious. Obviously, she won, if you want to call it that. There wasn't a bidding war. I just said, "Here's the number. One of you guys take it. That's it." The other one was like, this a very close friend of mine. And the funny part about him is he has one of the craziest collections and owns stores. And it's not anybody would think of. They're not, it's not like Feynman or you know what I mean? It's not the usual suspects of like people who use big store, like runs big stores in this community. But the other person, you would have never known that he bought anything. You would have never known, ever. Nobody would have known this story. I probably would have told it, but he would have never told anybody that the deal went down ever. So there was both buyers were complete opposites. One has been in the game only for a little while to, and B sells on Whatnot and does whatever she does, and C does great, and that's why she was even an option. And then the other one runs stores and is so low key. It was the polar opposite, and he's been around forever. And there was only a tiny bit of space between each offer. And that shows you a guy who's been around fucking forever was going to do this deal. So if that tells you on how serious the collection was at that price point, and he was willing to do it, it's that's the best I can tell you without showing you each shirt that was there for the amount of times that we went through each shirt.
Yeah, that speaks to the validity for sure, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, people will see it too. We're gonna get we'll absolutely get B's side of the story. We've already been speaking with her about it, and she's excited to tell her perspective. And I think after yours comes out first, then we'll have hers roll out, and it'll be fun to then be able to see both sides at the same time.
Awesome.
Amazing. So last question. Just give us what do you got planned for 2025 and any quick plugs and anywhere where people might be able to find you or your collection this year.
Yes, sir. First off, thank you for having me. This is awesome.
Ah,
I've been dying to get this off my chest for years, and I don't. That's not an years. It's been years. I haven't told this. I've told the story to very, very few people, people that I'm closest with, whether it's family, very close friends, and like maybe four or five people in vintage. So the fact that this is a story that I can finally tell and that'll get out to people that want to hear it is a huge weight off of my shoulders. So thank you for that. Um, I'm going back on tour in a working capacity. I don't play in bands anymore. I'm working for Deftones for their upcoming arena tour that starts in like a week or two, 2 weeks, I think. This is you're gonna. I don't know when you're gonna hear this, but it's February now. The tour starts at the end of February and it goes into April. So I'm not selling too much for the next few months. However, I whenever I'm back, your best your best way to get a hold of me for anything vintage related is my Instagram, which is Frank TWWK. Frank TWWK is my moniker. It has been for 20 years because of the band that I sang for back in the early 2000s. And that's been what I've been forever. So I'm never going to change it. It's just my identity. And I always have stuff for sale. I always had stuff for sale, even when I wasn't selling in that collection. I wanted to sell that collection as a whole from top to bottom, and I mostly did that. When I sold it to B, it was around 7,000 t-shirts. And even then, when I did ThriftCon in Miami, I had stuff for sale, but that had nothing to do with the collection. That's the craziest part. And after I did the deal with B and made money, I kept on buying. And at any given time, I'll have 300 to 400 shirts ready to go. So if you're ever looking for something specific, look at my Instagram. I'm very heavy into music, obviously because of my career and my interests, but I cater to everything in every category, as long as it's quality. And right this second, I have a bunch of crap on Depop because it's just I do deals that sometimes aren't that great and whatever. But by the time you hear this, all that shit's gonna be gone. So come directly to my Instagram because once I get back from tour, I go straight back to selling again. So Frank TWWK.
Frank, I appreciate it, man. Thank you for the kind words, and also thank you for choosing ThriftCon and our platform to tell this story because it was something that I was also very excited to hear the full story and to just get out there into the world because the vintage world deserves to know. They need to know, Frank. I appreciate you, man. We will hopefully our paths will cross soon. If you want to come then at any ThriftCon events this year, you just hit me up. You know there's always space for you. I appreciate it, man, and we will be in touch soon.
Thank you. For everybody listening, please, if you don't want to be a vendor, you still have to go to ThriftCon. And I don't say that to stroke Mars's ego. That is the event. I've done probably hundreds of events all over the country through different companies and avenues, and I've never had a bad day at ThriftCon as a salesperson ever. And once again, that has a lot to do with just me building up whatever, but it's that is the event to go to. That is the event to vend at, and I've never had a bad time there. So I appreciate you asking me to, or giving me that in whenever I actually can fit into my schedule. So if you ever see me promoting the fact that I'm doing a ThriftCon, just know that I am coming with my A game. And as Mars said at the beginning of this conversation, apparently I hold the record or one of the records for highest sales in a weekend ever. So come see me if I'm at a ThriftCon, but if I'm not going to be there, you should definitely go there as a spectator or a vendor because you're not going to want to miss out. It's worth the trip.
Yes, sir. I appreciate that. 10 different cities. 10 different cities in 2025. We're going to get Frank out to see if he can break that record again.
Thank you so much, man.
All right, man.